City Clerk, could you take the roll, please? Suffredin.
Alderman Suffredin. Here. Alderman Ravel. Here. Alderman Rainey. Here. Alderman Fleming. Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson. And Alderman Ruth Simmons. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. As everyone can tell, Eduardo Gomez, our Deputy City Clerk, is sitting in for Clerk Reed this evening. I understand Alderman Ruth Simmons is on her way, so she'll be here tonight, and Alderman Braithwaite is under the weather, so I don't think he's going to be here. So welcome everybody to the Monday, February 24th, 2020 Evanston City Council meeting. I hope everybody enjoyed the nice weather that we had this weekend, a little respite from winter before we get hit with a big snowstorm starting tomorrow. So I think our acting city manager will just give folks an update on that as we get prepared. Tonight I don't have any public announcements or proclamations, so acting city manager Storley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First announcement for tonight is regarding some habitat restoration that's going to be happening at the Clark Street Beach and Bird Sanctuary. So I'm going to ask Michael Callahan to give us a short overview of what's going to occur there so everybody is in the know.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, City Clerk, and Interim City Manager, thank you for this opportunity. I'm here tonight to discuss the Clark Street Bird Sanctuary habitat maintenance that we have planned. Specifically, what we're looking to do is work on the south side of the bird sanctuary. The north side is very well maintained, and I'd like to give a big thanks to all the volunteers for Evanston that come out to Evanston and help with this. They do a wonderful job. But the work area that we're looking at is more of the south side, right next to the restroom there. There's been an area there that has had an invasion of ash trees, saplings and seedlings that have come in. And the big issue here is that this site was planted originally back in 2015 with very high quality native trees that we want in the area. Unfortunately, what's happened is that there's been a bunch of saplings that have come in that are all ash trees, and with emerald ash borer being so prevalent in the Evanston area, we're wanting to take out these saplings prior to the trees getting much larger, just because of the cost and convenience and safety to the public. If these trees are allowed to grow to maturity, then we're going to have an issue with safety when they die from emerald ash borer. So it just saves us a lot of money. And it also buys us a lot of time. It gives these new trees that we put in back in 2015 time to actually grow, get acclimated, and actually start to thrive instead of them being suppressed here. So the big thing is to get desirable vegetation and better wildlife habitat. So the original landscape plan for the area did not call for any type of ash tree in the area. It was very well planted, like I said, with aspen, red osier dogwood, hawthorns, and some other trees. And the yellow area here shows where the main infestation of the ash trees are. So this is the main area, and what we're wanting to do is cut down these saplings and come in and then treat the stumps with an approved chemical so that they prevents it from resprouting because we just don't want these to continue up. And then we want to take some of the brush from this and actually make some a brush pile, a small brush pile, to complement the other brush pile that's already in the area, and another one I believe is on the north side. So the big issue for that is we want to provide good habitat for the birds and continue with this not restoration, but the maintenance of this site. It's a high value site, and it's something that we're looking to improve. And this is just part of normal maintenance. Anytime we have a habitat like this, we are going to have to do some sort of maintenance. And this is just basically the first stage of this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Yeah, Alderman Fisk.
Yes. Well, all right. So I'm a tree hugger, as I think all of us are up here, and I am concerned about the ash trees. Actually, are every species of ash affected by the emerald ash borer?
Yes, they are. All ash trees are susceptible to emerald ash borer.
Okay. So they're also native to our location.
Yes, they
So
are.
the fact that these are sprouting up, they're just doing what they would do if we weren't even here.
Exactly. They are doing exactly what they would be doing in normal succession. It's exactly what would be happening. The issue lies in that the ash borer doesn't attack the trees until they get larger in size. So then what we have is these ash trees that are going to be growing, getting larger in size, that are going to choke out the more desirable trees that we've already planted in the past. And then when the ash trees do die from the borer, then we're going to have to come in and remove them at that point. The proximity to the walkway right there is an issue, and ash trees have become very brittle when they die. So they lose moisture really quick, so they lose branches really, really quickly. So it's better, in my opinion, and in our opinion, to get these down while they're small so that we can actually buy some time to get some better tree species in there. So if it takes 10 years for these ash trees to die, we've lost 10 years of growth on other trees that we can put in that are better quality for long term.
Okay, but ash trees do provide a benefit to some species
They do.
to some animals that other trees don't.
Yes, and we do have ash trees in the area, and we will always have an ash component in the city. It's just this location, especially next to the sidewalk, next to the restrooms, it's just an area that, in my opinion, is not the best to maintain an ash tree grove at this point.
There's something that just rubs me the wrong way about managing a natural living plant in this way and making those decisions. That's just me. I understand exactly what you're saying, and that you're being practical, and I appreciate that. But I am very concerned about this particular tree and what we might be able to do, if there's anything that we can do now to encourage its presence in our city landscape.
Ash trees have a challenge in that one of the big challenges with emerald ash borer is that emerald ash borer feeds on all ash trees regardless of whether they're treated or not. So if the trees are treated with a chemical, then the ash borer still has to consume part of the tree to get the poison. And the poison, the insecticide that's used for these, from an environmental standpoint, I personally don't recommend doing many injections, especially around town for city trees, just because of the environmental impact to pollinator species and to local and native wildlife. So ash trees, to me, I look at it from, like you say, a practical standpoint, cost-benefit ratio type thing, and I just don't find them, unless we have a really nice specimen or something that's really important, memorial, something like that, that's a little bit different. But ash trees out in this location, if it was an area where the public wasn't around a whole lot to where we could let them just live their life and go through the natural cycle of things, I think that would be okay. Maybe more on the north side, where we do have some ash trees on the north side of the bird sanctuary where we're not doing any work with that. That's the right place for that.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better, so
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I also wanted to announce that, as you are mostly aware, there's a big snowstorm coming over the course of the next few days, and if we could get voluntary compliance on the primary routes for Wednesday evening, that would be appreciated, because we're going to be trying to be clearing a lot of snow in a short amount of time, and that will help us from potentially having to not call a snow route parking ban. But of course, we can't tell that now, but we're hoping that if we can get some voluntary compliance, then we can do a good bit of work on that before it would be necessary to call one. So thank you in advance. That is.
Okay, thank you. City or Deputy City Clerk, do you have any announcements tonight?
Yeah, one announcement. So for those of you that don't know, we have an election coming up on March 17th. And I just want to remind everyone that starting next week on March 2nd is going to be early voting. That's going to take place here at the Civic Center on the ground floor in room G300. So that's going to run through March 16th, so March 2nd through the 16th. And you'll also be able to take advantage of the grace period registration, where you can come in, register to vote, and cast your ballot at the same time. If you haven't registered to vote, you need 2 pieces of identification. Doesn't have to be a government-issued ID. It could be a bank statement, a school ID, something. One of them at least has to show your current address. So you'll also be able to do that as well. And that's all the announcements I have, Mayor Haggerty.
Thank you, Deputy City Clerk. We're now going to move to public comment. For those of you that are new to City Council, we set aside 45 minutes for public comment. Today we have 30 speakers that have signed up for public comment. So we take the number of speakers divided by the time. So that means everybody's going to have 1 minute and 30 seconds to speak. If you haven't spoken yet, this year we have a new system that's really, I think, been pretty helpful up there where you will see some lights, okay? And those lights are indicators of how much time you have. So when it's red, we can see that it's red up here. We're calling the next person, but I think it actually helps people, and I think it's been pretty effective so far this year. So we are, again, setting 1 minute 30 for each person, and then I will read off the first 3 names, and we'll go from there. Yeah, all right. Okay. All right. Tonight, Daniel Joseph will be our first speaker, then Mike Vasilko, then Carolyn Murray. Welcome. I'm sorry?
Hello, I'm Dan Joseph. I'm here for proposed ordinance 24020, snow removal, which needs amending. When Evanston has a major debilitating snowstorm, city trucks plow iceberg-dense slush onto sidewalks at crosswalks. The city moves it there. The city should remove it, not the adjacent property owners. It's on the book already that the property owners are responsible for it, yet it has not been enforced. Nobody's cited for it, and the snow just stays there. So why have it on the books if it's not necessary? Pedestrians should have priority over automobiles. Clear the sidewalks, but the city should not put snow on the sidewalks that was on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Mike Vasilko is next, Carolyn Murray, then Mark Simon.
First, I want to object to A5, which is another Evanston favorite, no bid contract to Smith Group, Robert Crown 2. So I'd like that objection recorded. But most importantly tonight, this council has sat silent while the most elder member chooses to muzzle Evanston citizens. Know that Alderman Rainey's actions to prevent, for the moment, the Evanston voter initiative from moving forward is a reflection on each and every one of you. Alderman Rainey is, in the meantime, is causing Evanston taxpayers to spend tens of thousands of dollars to pay for one of the most expensive law firms in Chicago and act as a co-conspirator to deny Evanston voters their constitutional rights. Trampling on Evanston voters' constitutional rights is becoming commonplace for this council, but a majority of the council members could change that. Bring your own motion to draft an Evanston voter initiative for the November ballot. The Evanston voter initiative will succeed one way or another, sooner or later. It would be to this council's advantage to initiate the referendum yourselves for more democracy, not Rainey's effort to limit democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Next we got Carolyn Murray, then Mark Simon, then Tina Payden.
Good evening, Council. So my name is Carolyn Murray. I wanted to bring a humanistic side to the most recent publication of the data breach for Snapchat. I want to tell you about one of the parents who wasn't notified, that wasn't aware that her son, who moved out of Evanston, and she has a younger son, that lives at that same address that was posted on the Snapchat, and she was very concerned about the safety of her son because the older son did not live there anymore and they look identical. And I'm going to tell you about another family who wasn't notified, and that black man that was posted and his name and address, he later went on to graduate from Morehouse. He has done very well and has been a teacher in the Illinois area. So to say that they were notified, I'm really not sure, because no one that contacted me, and I had at least 4 phone calls in regards to this investigation, but we're questioning the fact that he put a timeline for an investigation for kids who weren't even in Illinois at the time. So the incident cited that there were accidents. I just want to question, why is there constant accident as it pertains to black male in Evanston? You have an accident where they're accidentally arrested for stealing their own vehicle. They're held in a paddy wagon. Why is it that case with black males? On the last day of Black History here in Evanston, I want to appeal to you to have some type of system set up when there is a data breach. There was no notification on any of those families, and I think that that is the most severe disrespect to the families. I would also appeal to you to please at least consider offering those families some form of identity protection for any type of future incidents that might come up because of the data being released, and a letter just stating that it was a mistake and that they are completely, if you are completely apologetic for the situation happening, offer some type of corrective measure. And then I also question you that if this situation would have happened to white boys, white men, would you still have the same response? And if you can't say that you would or you wouldn't, then what is the point of having racial equality in Evanston if black lives don't matter?
Thank you, Carolyn. Mark Simon's next, Tina Payton, and Kelsey Davis.
Thank you. I'm Mark Simon, Chairman of the Preservation Commission. I'm here to speak with respect to the 612 Judson appeal. I'm not really here to oppose the appeal, but just to try to place it in its proper context. The homeowners purchased this 1873 home with the best of intentions, and unfortunately, after trying to restore the windows, realized there was lead paint in the window jambs. They've decided they need to replace the windows. The Preservation Commission did not oppose this decision. Our Preservation Code requires, and I'll quote, "In the event replacement is necessary, the new material should match the material being replaced in composition, design, color, texture, and other visual qualities." To comply with Illinois and federal standards, historic wood windows can be replaced by similar appearing wood or clad wood windows, and in limited circumstances, we've approved the use of Fibrex, a composite material that's partly wood. What the Commission do here was to disapprove replacement with vinyl windows. Vinyl is cheaper than wood-based products, but will not maintain the historic qualities and craftsmanship of this 1873 home, looks poor with wear, and is a non-sustainable material. It doesn't comply with the Evanston ordinance. Replacement with code-compliant windows that does cost more than vinyl windows, but it's the type of usual cost that we expect owners of historic properties to bear as a price for living in a beautiful neighborhood. The issue here is not that wood-clad windows are an unusual expense, but that these homeowners have personal financial stresses. The commissioners were sympathetic to their plight, but felt as a loss as to how the commission could determine who could afford to follow the preservation standards and who might receive a partial waiver. Speaking personally, I felt these residents tried in good faith to restore their home, and if the City Council does grant some kind of hardship exemption, I hope it can be limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Tina Payton, we've got next Tina, then Kelsey Davis, and then James Davis.
Good evening, Tina Payton, 1122 Emerson. So just follow up on the comment from the previous gentleman about the snow removal. As you can see at two of our properties on Emerson, you can see that this boulders of snow did not fall from the sky. This is the city plowing the snow, and as you can see from the second column, the snow was plowed so hard that it hit the door and the window of the building, which is outrageous and unacceptable. Could we spend some time on giving training on how to plow the snow? On these two occasions, I had to pay someone 3 times to plow the snow, and then I called the city because this was big boulders of ice the next morning. So if you would spend less time harassing me about my bush at 1122 Emerson and train the people on how to plow the snow. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelsey Davis. Kelsey, come on up, and then we've got James Davis and then Mary Rosinski.
So I'm here about the proposed parking lot at St. A's Church, the special use permit. So I live at 1627 Lincoln Street, and my garage shares the alley with the proposed parking lot by St. Athanasius Church and School. In fact, the proposed parking lot would be lined up behind my garage. I copied you all in on an email to Alderman Revel last Friday, and I hope you had a chance to read a more detailed account of what the last 10 years have been like sharing the alley and being neighbors with St. A's. I just want to reiterate my main points here tonight. First, St. A's has been using our city-owned alley as an access road for 10 years. They have made promises and have not kept them. They have blocked access to my garage in the afternoons for about 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 9 months of the year, and they tell me it's not too much of an inconvenience. I would say it's a big inconvenience. The alley is an alley, and it is not wide enough to be an access road. The required 2-foot setback isn't enough when cars are trying to pass. I have to use the open space that will be filled with parked cars if the parking lot goes ahead. The school states that the purpose of this lot is to move parked cars from the north lot to create open space for the kids to play. The proposed parking spaces is not enough. They are asking for 21 spaces. They need 21 plus for staff, plus parents who come and go during the day. So cars will be moving in the area the kids want to play. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. James? And then Mary Rosinski, then Liz Kramer.
Hi, James Davis. I also live at 1627 Lincoln Street, so carrying on from my wife's comments. I'm curious to hear from the council what their thoughts are about the shortcomings that the zoning board identified in extensive considerations late last year. I'm not convinced that the amendments that have been put forward come near to addressing it. Even the one amendment they've made I don't think will actually address the fundamental challenge of people parking in our alley and disruptive traffic in the immediate neighbourhood. So I'd be keen to hear the city's thought, the council members' thoughts on that. I'm also keen to understand what limitations might be imposed if the approval to use these parking spaces goes ahead. We've had serious problems with when they rent the space out at football games, people lighting fires right behind my backyard, the language my children have to hear, it's not acceptable. When asked about this previously, they indicated they don't have control of it. I think they've said they're not going to renew it this year, but who knows what they'll do in the future. So I want the council to put some limitations on. I'd like to see some teeth to those limitations as well, because frankly the school does not have a good record of sticking by the promises it makes. It's very good at saying, well, we'll put people there to staff the alley, we'll supervise things. They do it for a few weeks, and it stops. So I'm anxious, which we try to be a good neighbour to them. They don't reciprocate that, frankly. I'd like the council to help us in that. If they want to improve these things, make it safer for them and their students, fine. But let's ensure that they're held accountable for what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Mary Rosinski, Liz Kramer, then Willie Shaw.
Hi, Mary Rosinski. I feel these guys' pain because, you know, with the Northwestern, we deal with that all the time. And I just find it ironic that staff is not recommending, although I don't want them to have to deal with what we have to deal with. But I really came here to talk about, I love the new parking app, and I love being in Evanston on Sundays. So thank you for that, because that is awesome that you can go from place to place and take your time, right? Am I correct on that? It's awesome. I did also want to speak to that EVI is not a threat to democracy. It enhances and supplements democracy by giving people who are willing to work really hard on an issue the opportunity to have it considered. It takes thousands of people's and thousands of hours of people's time to have a voice. Almost all referendum questions have two sides, and it's up to both sides to present their cases to the public through the forums, meetings, news, and then on election day, it's up to the voters to decide. The opposition to EVI is the real threat to democracy. A few people are opposed and then rally the weight of the city resources to back their and fund their opposition rather than take the case to the public and let the issues see the light of day. I hope that the appellate court decides in favor of the People's Initiative. This is a tool which may never be used if the council is responsive. But when the governing body does not follow its rules or procedures or ignores the public, then this can be a tool to bring democracy back. It's not an easy procedure. It takes time and it takes resources. And I also love the idea of, I read through your sustainability. I wish Robert Crown had used more of these things, like solar panels, geothermal.
Thank you, Mary. Liz, come on up. Liz Kramer, Willie Shaw, and then Carla Sutton.
Hello. I'm Liz Kramer, and I'm representing Evanston Maid tonight, and I'm just here to share with you our programming for April. We have a program called Art for the Earth, which is a citywide month-long celebration of the arts honoring the 50th anniversary of Earth Day and Earth Month, utilizing the voices of our artists and their work to bring attention to Earth Month and our commitment to protecting the environment and taking action against climate change. Our arts programming for the month kicks off on April 4th with First Saturday, Evanston, and includes exhibitions, artist talks, demonstrations, and art making for all ages in multiple locations throughout the city. We are collaborating with CGE, Alliance for the Great Lakes, and several other organizations to bring subject matter experts into our art events so that we can have an education and a public engagement activity and to participate in giving everybody something to take action on for Earth Month. We're also asking our businesses in town to participate through our Windows for the Earth display contest. And I have a partial calendar for you. It's too long to give you the whole thing. So if anyone's interested in joining in with us, all the information is at evanstonmaid.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Good evening.
Willie.
Willie Shaw, Evanston North Shore branch of the NAACP, Civic Engagement and Political Action Chair. Also here to share some just community information with you in order to prepare our members, to prepare our supporters and the community for the big census count coming up. The NAACP has been taking part in Census Week that started today and will end on Friday. In the sake of time, I won't go through what we've done, but we've done several things that will continue through the week. But the Evanston North Shore branch has also partnered with the U.S. Census Bureau. We have met with the census specialists, and a group of us on committees have all been trained by our regional representatives. So that representative or someone from the Evanston local branch is out here and ready and willing to assist any of you in hosting any events that you have. We're looking for senior people that are in senior facilities, our fraternities, our sororities, all of the wards, civic club, faith-based organization, any of those we are willing to work with, and we hope you're willing to work with us so that we get a complete census count. You may contact the Evanston NAACP at naacpev@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carlos Sutton, Leslie Shad, then Paul Harvey. You're up, Carlos.
Good evening. Carlos Sutton, 1821 Darrell Avenue. I'll be brief. I'm here to about the concern of Ordinance 2402 about the sidewalks cleared of snow. It's been a very concern in my block, the 1800 block of Darrell, especially with driveways occupied by 3 elderly residents who have had extensive problems with the snowplow blocking their driveways in after they have removed the snow by hand. Now, my dad drove a snowplow in the city for 30 years, and the practice then was when you got to people's private driveways, you raised the blade so you would not break their backs. Maybe you could tell the snowplow drivers that you probably implement the practices that they used in the past to give the residents a chance, not rather harassing them, and especially in the Fifth Ward, about coming around and removing snow. You could also remove the snow on some of your own sidewalks, like around Dempster and on Dodge. You know, you should set the amendment rather than punishing us for not doing our work. Why don't you lead us by showing how well you can remove the sideways from public areas? I also support the comments of Ms. Price and the EVI. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Leslie, come on up. Leslie Shad, then Paul Harvey, then Albert Gibbs.
Thank you very much. I'm Leslie Shad, and I'm speaking about Natural Habitat Evanston. And thank you all for the tree ordinance proposal that's coming up tonight and focusing on trees. We greatly appreciate it. I just want to mention that this is really to protect the biggest trees, the 20 to 25 inch and above. And I want to mention that the current draft, to me, my understanding is that it allows trees to a permit to be applied for the trees. But what would then happen is that there would be a replacement or a payout, the trees would be priced out or they would be replaced instead of preserved. And I just want to put a pitch in for preserving these big old trees. Other North Shore communities deal with that by trying to create a standard by which permits are approved or not. This, I believe that Evanston's proposal really just allows the city to just provide permits that replace or charge out for trees. So that's an appeal to preserve these old trees. Thank you so much for everything y'all do.
Thank you, Leslie. Paul, then Albert Gibbs, then Elliot Zation.
Thank you. My name is Paul Harvey, 35-year resident in Evanston, 25 years at St. A's. I'm here pitching to get some support for the addition of what is 10 parking spaces on our property. Yes, it does have a variety of alleys that are there and need some attention, and we've gone through that for quite some time. I want to thank Ms. Ravel, as I've thanked her before, for much of the time and leading this to a solution. So hopefully we're getting closer to that. And also we've had Scott Mangum, Laura Biggs, and Rajiv, who came out to do a traffic study for us as well. So we've gone through a variety of iterations. We've made some good progress. We're trying to essentially alleviate congestion in the parish's main parking lot, allowing students a better place with a consolidated outdoor play area with no moving cars. So we're really just moving the cars to another area. We've already agreed to not renting out that new space, those new 10 parking spaces. We do have the traffic study that has been done and submitted approximately a couple weeks ago. We also had hopefully productive meetings with our neighbors, with the community at large, with the parish, and with the alderwoman. That was nice of her to attend. And then the north parking lot can be rented but must have a variety of tailgate issues enacted. And those were in place before. We will do a better job of making them certainly loud and clear.
Thank you, Paul.
Essentially, one more second here is we are trying to build up a much more secure and safe playground, as well as accommodating the local neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Albert Gibbs. Looks like Albert's in intense conversation. You want to come up, Elliot? We'll have you. I'll get to him when he's done this conversation with the alderman.
Elliot Zation, 9th Ward. I'm directing my remarks to the mayor and the council and the voters of Evanston. There's a controversy going on about the Evanston voter initiative, and it's important that everyone knows what is at stake. The EVI is a referendum that, if passed by a majority of voters, will give the voters of Evanston a mechanism to bring proposed ordinances and policy proposals before the council by petition and referendum. The EVI would not take away the council's responsibility to make final decisions, but it would require them to make public decisions on matters important to their constituents. It provides the voters with more democracy and does not change the basic form of our governance. It is that simple. When supporters collected over 800 signatures to put this measure on the ballot, we thought it would be there on March 17th. But a few residents objected, and the Electoral Board, which is empowered to consider such objections, voted to approve the objections and block the initiative from going forward to the ballot. Supporters, like myself, have appealed that decision, and the matter is now before the Illinois Appellate Court. We think that these objectors are trying to deny the voters of Evanston from deciding whether or not they would like to have this infusion of democracy into their basic system of governance. A couple of my colleagues will also speak on this, and I hope they will pose some questions to the council as to where they stand on the EVI. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Albert Gibbs, come on up. And then we've got Doreen Price and then Ray Friedman.
Good evening. Albert Gibbs, Fifth Ward resident. I am livid. I'm so livid I could turn colors. And I was afraid I was about to turn white when I got the news that 3 of my family members were in this so-called mistake of publishing their public information, of publishing their personal information. The young lady had been shot following this gang activity, all the shootings that was going on, because they threatened the family that we're going to kill your son. And then they decided they're going to get anyone in the family they could. So she got shot. And she moved out of Evanston. And with the outcome of this mess, now where she lives, where all of her personal information is concerned, she is under doctor's care that she is going to get murdered. Mistakes don't happen like that. Not from what I understand Snapchat is. You can only publish 1 page at a time. There are 5 pages, which means the redundancy of this stupidity was done 5 times or more. I'm sorry it's not going to stop a bullet. Shut up. I'm sorry it's not going to stop a bullet. And I pray that this child and her children do not come up murdered because of this stupidity. This is not a game. This is people's lives. I'm not going to take it laying down if anything happens to my babies. I'm not going to take it. And whatever you need to do as responsible people, you need to get busy and show some accountability. These aren't mistakes. These aren't mistakes. This young man had a comment next to his page that said, pending HIV. What does that mean? Pending HIV. So his lawyer sent him to a doctor immediately to have all tests taken. He doesn't have HIV. He doesn't have venereal disease. Why is this happening? And supposedly peace of a sort has existed from all the shootings that we know were occurring. Doesn't have to be you or your family for it to make a difference in whether someone's getting killed or not. You just have to have a heart to care. You gotta care. And if you aren't going to do something about it, well, you will be demonstrating you don't care.
Thank you.
More needs to be done. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your patience. But this is not a damn joke. Let's not play it like one. Get busy, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, get busy.
Doreen Price is up next. Is Doreen here? and then Ray Friedman, and then we'll have Bennett Johnson. That's okay.
I want to thank Mr. Sutton because he had read what I wrote before I got here. It was to a group of people that I adore in terms of their devotion to fairness, equity, and making things Evanston a better place despite many setbacks in their lives. And I get inspired by being with them. So it's with that humility, and with Mr. Gibbs as well, that I address you. And you can read the rest of it if I don't finish it because I want to make this from the heart. I feel there's an opportunity for more experienced and greater voices than mine at the upcoming March 5th Affordable Housing Community Meeting. The recent 220 joint meeting, we're talking about Environmental Board and Equity and Empowerment Commission, was timely and monumental. You've not heard me use that word. Regarding sustainability and environmental justice, but short on voices attending that meeting. So greater two-way community engagement than currently at City Council meetings can clarify social and environmental justice policies, because we only have a minute to talk at these things, priorities and solutions, especially affordable and sustainable housing in a predatory and conflicting economy. Environmental and social justice considerations can integrate and simplify, as with my 212 answer to affordable housing questionnaire, which I include as my background. And lastly, as we know, the zoning must address environmental challenges and social justice as they relate to our whole community. Sustainability and resiliency need to be in our conversations if we're going to promote and protect social, economic, and community well-being, especially for the most vulnerable, to whom I'm indebted. Thanks.
Thank you, Doreen. Ray Friedman, Bennett Johnson, Aldrich Martinez Olson.
Good evening, everyone. Ray Friedman, Second Ward. You know, the world is in a very fragile state right now. We have a lot of issues: the coronavirus, global warming, global economy, housing issues, to name a few. Not to mention the stock market dropped over 1,000 points today. I don't think that ever happened. And they're predicting 12 inches of snow in the next couple of days. Those are issues we don't have much control over. So let's talk about a few issues that we do. What happened to the dialogue we keep asking about? What's happening with James Park? Are we replacing pipes or not? Are you going to give 1305 Pittner a valid zoning approval? When will we have the discussion with HR.gov? And most important, why are you against putting Evanston voter initiative on the ballot, so that Evanston registered voters can have a voice and a choice as intended by the Constitution? Do you think that by ignoring our questions and concerns that these issues will go away or solve themselves? I can assure you they will not go away, and neither will we. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I can promise you this, Ray. We're going to talk about city manager search tonight with GovHR, so we'll check that one. Bennett Johnson. Welcome, Mr. Johnson. Then Aldrich Martinez Olson, then Lily Aaron.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city manager, deputy clerk, and fellow citizens, we have a Republican form of government in this country and in this council. In other words, you individuals represent people, citizens of this particular city. Unfortunately, one of the problems that usually occurs, I spend a lot of time in politics, is that you have more information, you make decisions that affect the entire community, and sometimes you acquire a certain sense of self that's exaggerated, and you forget that you're supposed to represent the people, or you forget. And it's the one good thing about Evanston is that we have a chance to fuss at you from time to time. matter of Kevin Brown, for example, and then the fact that there was a woman who was pregnant, a member of the staff of the city, who was harassed. Robert Crown, and millions of dollars went into the city, and none, I'll strike that. Very little went to the people, the individual entrepreneurs who spent their lives in this town trying to make a living. Evanston Voter Initiative. There are many, strike that. We need to realize that you have the power, but in fact, the power is with the vote. So the power is with the people. So I'm recommending very strongly that you begin to think more about the people you represent rather than the issues that you're concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Bennett. Aldrich. Aldrich, then Lily Aaron, then Wendy Pollock, and then Lauren Aviso.
Hello, I'm Aldrich Martinez Olson, and I'm a senior at Evanston Township High School. I stand before you today out of fear. I'm afraid for the future of my friends, my children, and myself. It gives me constant anxiety knowing that we aren't organizing more quickly to resolve the issue of the climate crisis. I take individual steps every day and have devoted hours of my time to climate justice movements, but after all this time, I realize that what needs to change are the systems that we interact with. The only way I can get rid of that constant fear is to know that I'm surrounded by institutions that fully recognize our fears and take tangible steps to address them. Other cities have taken great strides in becoming sustainable. Other cities have recognized that climate change is a social justice and equity issue. In 2018, we passed a comprehensive climate action resilience plan like nowhere else in the country. We've also passed reparations. Evanston has already achieved so much, and I know we can achieve more. It is now a question of when.
Thank you, Aldrich. Lily, come on up, and then Wendy Pollock.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to be discussing the climate plan in Evanston. I'm sure you've all heard something to the extent of what I'm about to say before. My name is Lily Aaron. I'm 16. I'm a sophomore at Evanston Township High School. I like to spend my time doing theater, taking naps, and hanging out with my friends. But I find myself increasingly more often attending climate justice meetings, presentations, and protests throughout Evanston. I'm not just participating in this work because I like to. I'm participating in this work because I have to. I know that this might sound a bit corny and cliche, but as a member of Gen Z, I feel as though it is my duty to stand up for myself and for my peers who aren't as educated or don't have adequate resources in the face of fighting this frightening crisis. In terms of the city of Evanston, we passed CARP in December of 2018. It has been over a year since then, and we have yet to implement it in a way that is truly impactful in the community. As a teenager who is scared for her future and knows that change only begins with policy, I need to know that the city of Evanston will have my future in mind. Will you take the action that is necessary?
Thank you, Lily. Wendy, then Lauren, and then Marie Sebia.
Thank you. This is why we're all here. I'm with the Environment Board. Several other members of the board are here as well. And this is why we have made it our #1 priority since the CARP plan was adopted to do whatever we can to help promote its implementation. So I did want to say on a positive note that some of us met with the mayor and interim city manager in January, and we were very encouraged by their commitment to leading the city on climate action and using their positions to spread the word about its urgency. So thank you. I know you've been out there doing that. In that meeting, we also underscored what we see as the importance of making sustainability and climate resilience a key factor in the recruitment and selection of a new city manager. So I know that's on the agenda tonight. Of training the whole staff on climate action so we can all be acting in concert in evaluating city actions through the lens of climate action and looking ahead, just officially making implementation of CARP an official city policy and goal. So we ask your support as a council for all of these as well. I know you'll be hearing from Kumar Jensen this evening, and we just want to express our support for him as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Lauren, and then Marie Sabia. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing people's names, and then Rabbi Dov Klein.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lauren Marquez-Viso. I'm a Second Ward resident, and I work at Rotary International. I am the Vice President of Citizens Greener Evanston, and I was the co-chair of the Mayor's Climate Action and Resilience Plan Working Group. So this is the year 2020. This year I will be 40 years old, a milestone. For my entire life, climate change and its adverse impacts have been known, and world leaders, policymakers, corporations, cities, older generations have failed me. They failed my son. They failed us. They failed our Earth with their unwillingness to take meaningful action to address this crisis. And now I have to fight and step up for our planet, for a future for my generation and all those after me. This is a time to activate, to step up and do our part to solve this crisis. CGE endorses this request from the Environment Board to prioritize sustainability and CARP in the city's goals and priorities. Kumar has done an excellent job thus far, but needs more support in the way of personnel and financial resources to implement the CARP plan. It's also not just about one department or one person working on sustainability, but each and every city department and team being trained on and knowledgeable about the CARP plan and what it means for the work they do, and then working together toward cohesive and clear goals laid out in a very clear and concise CARP implementation plan. I believe the city should look into hiring an outside consultant to assist with the creation of a very detailed CARP implementation plan. So we cannot be radical enough, we cannot be innovative enough or courageous enough in the face of the climate crisis. So please fight alongside me. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Marie, then Rabbi Klein, and then Ali Harned.
Hi, Marika Bia. I'm speaking on behalf of District 65 Green Teams. I'm also a physician with an interest in the connection between climate change and health. I'm from Puerto Rico, and both my kids have attended the dual language program. We have made strides in some schools in District 65, yet it is time for these efforts to reach not just the lucky few, but all District 65 students. Where I stand, I have no trouble seeing the urgency of climate action. Both my kids have on separate occasions told me that they have heard friends tell them that the world would end in 10 years if we do not solve the climate crisis now. This was obviously a misunderstanding based on the concept of the carbon budget. I know my children are not alone in their anxiety and the feeling of urgency, and it breaks my heart that it's the kids and not the adults who are feeling this. We're appreciative of the work that Kumar and the entire CARP group have performed now. It is time to give CARP the teeth needed to turn this plan into action. Implementing CARP would help incentivize District 65 to use a uniform lens of sustainability when making purchasing, training, energy, and curriculum decisions. This concerted approach is needed to educate the environmental stewards who will sustain CARP goals in the future. The longer we wait to implement, the more we contribute to widening health disparities. I invite everyone to attend the screening of the documentary Cooked this Thursday, because there's no more graphic representation of climate inequity than seeing the literal mass graves that were dug for victims of the 1995 heat waves. Extreme temperatures can be lethal, but they're always more so for the sick, the poor, and the elderly. The City Council must empower Kumar and his team with the resources needed to expedite the implementation of CARP. Our kids and the generations after them deserve more than words on a piece of paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Rabbi Klein, Ali Harned, then Roger Sosa.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I just wanted to note into the record that a week and a half ago we lost a very dear friend to our community here in Evanston, Reverend Chaplain Father David Jones. Don't have time at the minute in order to sit and eulogize him, but he was an unbelievable spiritual leader here in Evanston, who had tremendous love for every single one of our citizens, who was well respected in our community, and his passing is going to leave a big hole here in our city. He spent tens of thousands of volunteer hours helping our police officers and our firefighters as one of their chaplains. And I think I'm hoping that this council can put some sort of resolution together for him and his family and his church community, his faith community, in order to show our gratitude as a city to the countless hours and loving care that he took care here for our citizens here in Evanston. Perhaps with the 26 seconds I have left, we can have just a quick moment of silence to think of David Jones and memorialize him. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Darlene, were you signed up and I? I'm speaking in Alex's spot. Okay.
Darlene Cannon, Second Ward. I'm speaking on behalf of EVI. The question now arises, why would a few individuals, including the mayor, Alderman Rainey, former Alderman Jane Grover, and a few others, want to prevent voters from having a more say in deciding what matters, and the council should address these. The EVI does not take away from the council's responsibility to make the final decision, but will require them to make a public decision on matters important to their constituents. It provides the voters with more democracy and does not change the basic form of our government. It's that simple. We have never heard what the members of the council think about EVI. Do you favor such a mechanism? We would like to know. At the moment, it appears that the City Council is paying expensive lawyers who specialize in municipal matters to forestall a decision by the courts to allow the referendum to go forward. In effect, using taxpayers' funds to prevent voters from having more democracy. This is quite ironic, unfair, and unpopular. Thank you.
Thank you. And Roger Sosa, you're going to wrap it up for us tonight, Roger.
Good evening. Roger Sosa with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm here in support of the work that's being done by Kumar Jensen and his team on CARP. The Chamber wants to make it public that we very much support the goals of CARP. We believe that it's a great goal to be carbon free and carbon neutral, by 2015. Nobody's going to be carbon free. And the Chamber has participated in helping them in this process. We've conducted surveys with our members. We've had members of Kumar's team at several of our events in order to pass out literature. We've been actively working with that team to help plan things for the future. As we see it for businesses in Evanston, climate action is not just an opportunity to do the right thing, but it's also an opportunity to be smart from a business perspective. It's an opportunity to relate to a whole other generation of consumers and buyers who are much more interested in holding companies' feet to the fire relative to their own sense of morals and their own ethics and their own things that they want the world to be. So in that regard, we're very much aware that we have to, as a chamber, be involved in the implementation of this. And so just want to let you know that on April 22nd, which I believe is Earth Day, the chamber is holding an information series on how to green your business. And we are planning on having experts to talk about why it's good business to be green, and also the nuts and bolts of how you accomplish that in a way that's profitable and allows you to still be an ongoing business, because those two things we don't believe are in conflict. So we would like to invite everybody here in the room to attend that, April 22nd, How to Green Your Business. Go to the Chamber website. You'll find more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. It's great to have a leader from the business community here speaking about the importance of the environment. Thank you, everybody, for coming out for public comment and speaking. Oh, if your name was on and I missed it, I'm sorry. Come on up here and introduce yourself. My apologies, and then we'll move into the agenda. Yes.
Sorry, my name is Betsy Bear. I live at 2438 Eastwood, and I am speaking on the issue with the parking lot at St. A's. We've been going back and forth on this for a little bit, and I support everything that Kelsey and James were saying about the issues, the very serious issues surrounding the safety of the children and the families that are back up to that alley. But I want I'm asking the council and the mayor to also consider one other thing. That property, until a year and a half ago, had a little white house on it and was zoned residential. And I am questioning the right of any institution to change the look and feel of a residential neighborhood. They have purchased the house next door, and so now all the property that borders St. A's is now owned by St. A's, and they are looking for special use permits to turn what used to be a lovely yard and a lovely home into a parking lot. There's a great song about that, but I won't go into that. So I urge you, along with Kelsey and James and our neighbors, to vote against the special use permit because it changes the feel of our neighborhood, and I know none of you would want that to happen in your own neighborhoods, and it also undermines the safety of the community. What's been going on with the tailgating has been dangerous, and it has not been healthy for the neighborhood. So I thank you very much, and I agree David Jones was a wonderful guy, and I didn't know I was wearing green on purpose, but I'm with you.
All right. Well, thank you, Betsy. Thank you, everybody, for coming out for public comment. We're now going to move into the agenda. This evening, we have a couple items on special consideration. Alderman Nguyen, if you would move SP1.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. SP1 is an application for appeal to the City Council, a Preservation Commission decision denying certificate of appropriateness for 612 Judson Avenue to replace 21 wood windows with vinyl windows.
Is there a second? No.
I move approval.
All right, and that was seconded. Okay, this is now open for discussion. We'll go to Alderman Fisk. I think beat you to it. Alderman Fisk and then Alderman Nguyen.
Oh, I'm happy to have Alderman Nguyen go first.
Right,
Maybe she can explain something.
Alderman Nguyen and then Alderman Fisk.
Okay. I do want to speak to this issue. It is in the 3rd Ward, which almost all of the 3rd Ward is in the Lakeshore Historic District. And I have always been a very, very strong supporter and proponent of historic preservation here in Evanston, not only just in my ward, and indeed with my own home. When we did a renovation a number of years ago, we followed the preservation ordinance very carefully, even though my house is not a landmark. But in this very specific instance, I have talked with the homeowner and met with the homeowner. I am going to support I'm going to make sure, I have to make sure, I'm going to support a denial, no, I'm going to support their appeal, that's right. And I do want to explain why, and in this particular set of circumstances. But first, I'd like to say that Ms. Portzer had explained to me that they are not going to replace the windows with vinyl windows, but with a wood clad in fiberglass, which is different, and I don't know all the details of its wear, but I think it's more expensive than vinyl, and I think is certainly much better than having it replaced by vinyl. These homeowners recognized that they were buying a home in the historic district. They were happy to do that. They met with Carlos Ruiz, our preservation coordinator, beforehand. They were very excited about this house. They knew that it needed a fair amount of renovation, and they undertook that. But this renovation has turned out to be more than twice as expensive as they expected. Even their home inspector did not discover that there was an extra chimney hidden in the walls of their home, and several notched beams. they've undertaken the asbestos removal, and there are a number of other things. But they have had an extra $100,000 in renovation costs added to this house that they purchased and did work on a great deal. So I think I recognize that living in a preservation in a historic district, you do have extra costs, but there are extra benefits. However, in this instance, I believe that the Portskers made a very good faith effort. They're not trying to evade our preservation ordinance in any way. And because they're replacing the windows, not with vinyl windows, but with this other particular kind of window, which I believe is called an elevate, and that the closest window to the sidewalk that they're replacing is 73 feet. So these are not on the front face of the house. So I do not want to set a precedent by doing this, and I appreciate the Preservation Commission Chair coming and talking to us about this evening, and I believe that under this set of facts and circumstances that I am in support of the Portzers and their plan to replace the windows. But in the future, I would never support vinyl windows, but I think in this particular set of facts and circumstances, the distance from the sidewalk, I am supportive.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first of all, I want to thank Mark Simon for coming and explaining the Preservation Commission's position on this. For those of us who have been deeply involved in historic preservation of houses in Evanston and working with the Preservation Commission, the windows are the single most important element in a historic house. So it's not just they want to replace their windows. This is extremely important. The problem with vinyl windows is that vinyl just does not give. When a house has been here for 50 or 100 or 150 years, there's a certain amount of movement in a house and in the structure, the foundation of the house, that vinyl windows simply are not forgiving. The best thing to do is, as Mr. Simon said, is to rework the wooden windows and hopefully keep the house intact with its original materials. I thank Alderman Nguyen for her comments as well. There's a couple of things that I want to make sure of that we're amending the petition to be to take vinyl out and put in the elevate windows and make that specific. I wish Mr. Simon were still here. I would ask him whether the commission had discussed the elevate windows. It sounds to me like they may have, and that's fine if they were fine with that. I think my larger question is, we're probably the worst panel to talk to because we're not down in the weeds with the technical aspects of these as the Preservation Commission is. But I'm going to make a couple of suggestions. The first is when we have someone who has a landmark house or in a historic district who wants to be doing work of this kind, that when they fill out their permit application, of course, they check the box saying that they're within a historic district or they are a landmark, that we give them the Secretary of Interior's guidelines on which our standards that the Preservation Commission follows are included, so they can see the importance that we're not just being arbitrary about what we think would be nice and that we're picking the most expensive thing to burden them with, but that there's a real reason for this. So I'd like staff to be thinking about how we can make that a little bit clearer at the moment of the permit application. And I would also like to thank the Preservation Commission because it sounds to me like they really made an effort here to try to get to a good place, a good compromise for the homeowners, as well as for following the standards. I live in a landmark. My husband and I put an addition on the landmark. We've got wood windows. We kept the wood windows and we put on wooden storm windows, and that seemed to solve our energy questions. There's a lot of things that you can do, and I understand the homeowner here has made certainly a valiant effort to try to do that. But when you walk into a home improvement store or you watch Saturday afternoon TV and everyone's telling you, oh, you can rip this out and put this in, it makes me cringe, because there's so many other alternatives that that homeowners can be doing that in a lot of cases are less expensive and much more compatible with the historic nature of their house. So I think we as a city can try to deal with that and play our role as educators. But I think in this case, a good compromise has been reached. I just want to make sure that the application will be amended to reflect that we're no longer approving vinyl windows.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other comments, discussion? Okay, seeing none, Alderman Nguyen, would you like to move then the specific? Oh, excuse me, we're not done. Alderman Rainey.
I'm sorry, I couldn't reach the button. I want to respond to Alderman Fisk. I read the packet and the efforts of the Preservation Commission and the applicant a little differently. I read it in the reverse, that the applicant had done everything humanly possible given their situation to meet the demands required of them, and they said very clearly after page and point after point in their explanation that they had simply reached the end of their rope, and they were it was physically impossible for them to do what the Preservation Commission was demanding of them. And I mean, including, and I thought going to the extent of putting wooden storm windows on the interior to cover up the leaded paint in the interior front windows was just going beyond the pale, that I felt that they were just going way too far in their effort. The only preservation issue that I ever was involved in was when I helped lead the effort in the Oakton Historic District, and I promised people at that time, and it is a different kind of historic district than the Lakeshore District, that it wouldn't be unreasonable. And I have so much respect for Alderman Nguyen in this case for being so reasonable, given these people who made such an amazing effort to do everything right. They have little children. The real issue here was lead. They could not scrape the lead out of the tracks in the window, and all the experts told them, you can't cover that up. When the windows go up and down and slide back and forth, there's nothing you can do. The lead dust is going to fly. And they had children, they had a child under 1 and under 5. I mean, it's a horrible situation. And, and I don't think there are people who watch TV and, how to fix your house. I think these are people who got into the quote-unquote weeds of how to fix this house, and they couldn't, given the Preservation Commission's restrictions. And they were just, the commission was doing its job, but there was no way they could get together. The Preservation Commission had to deny, I believe. They had no other choice, I don't believe. And I think Alderman Nguyen took the lead and helped us to accept the appeal and approve it. So I hope this family lives there forever, and that everybody's healthy and nobody is, the windows match. And I think we have to really be careful, because otherwise only people like Jennifer Pritzker are going to be able to buy those big fancy houses in the future and fix them. And come on, you know that. I mean, you did what you did years ago. You probably couldn't do what you did now. I'm just saying, we have to use some common sense every now and then. And so therefore I'm voting in favor along with Alderman Nguyen.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Fisk.
Yeah, Alderman Rainey, I'm not going to argue with you about this. I think you're taking some of what I said out of context.
I'm sorry.
I tried. No, that's okay.
I like you a lot, and I love your
I
house.
I like you too a lot, and I'm sure that we're both really well intended, and we'll have a kumbaya moment when we can hold hands. I'm not making any derisive comments about these people are lovely people. Obviously, they tried. I'm just saying, in future, there is a reason that we have standards. A reason why windows are important. Yeah, and people, if people don't understand that there is a way to do this, and that's not presented to them, and they're getting a lot of other information, we should share that information with them.
There was a solution to this problem: money.
Well, the solution.
Let's just take a vote on this matter. I think we're gonna.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say one other thing, and that is the solution was arrived at after the Preservation Commission made their decision. That they came and they found another window that worked for them. Alderman Nguyen was heroic in her efforts to bring everyone together, so she gets a lot of credit for this. There's really, this is a win-win. So I think we can probably leave it at that.
So, and Alderman Nguyen will say, I move that we accept the appeal and
You're reversing the decision.
Excuse me, reverse the decision of the Preservation Commission and approve the replacement of these windows with a wood-clad in fiberglass window by the name of Elevate, and with all of my prior comment included as legislative history, please.
Second.
All right. City Clerk, can you take a roll, please, on SB1?
Alderman Sufferton, Alderman Revelle, Alderman Rainey, Alderman Fleming, Alderman Fisk, Alderman Braithwaite, Alderman Nguyen,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
All right, SB1, the application for appeal to the City Council Preservation Commission decision denying certificate of appropriateness for 612 Judson Avenue to replace 21 wood windows with vinyl windows has been reversed by the City Council per the discussion this evening with those conditions on a vote of 8-0. We're now going to move to SP2, which is our sustainability legislative update. Kumar Jensen, our Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer, is going to get up and speak about this. Before you start to talk, Kumar, I would just say the history, so everybody's on the same page, is at the end of 2018, the City Council adopted the Climate Resilient Action Plan. It was the third iteration of an action plan here in Evanston. A lot of tremendous work went into that by lots of the folks that are here in the audience today and others in the community. Kumar has spent last year, 2019, working with people in the community to put together an implementation plan. I feel really strongly, and I know some other people up here do as well, that 2020 is the year that we have to, pass ordinances to make progress and fulfill commitments that we've made in this plan. They are big commitments here that put us sort of in the leading pack in this country, but a lot of work has to be done, and a lot of work, I think, groundwork has been laid already, and the fact that the business community represented by the Chamber was up here tonight supporting CARP is a really good sign of that. So welcome, Kumar. I look forward to what you have to share with us tonight on a legislative update for 2020.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor, members of the Council, Deputy Clerk, and Manager Storley, Kumar Jensen, Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer. I do just want to take a quick moment to thank and recognize all the community members who have been working on this since I've been here, since 2018, but going all the way back to 2005 and earlier. A lot of the work that we're doing today is built off of the progress that has been made. So this evening, as the Mayor mentioned, I'm going to be talking about legislative agenda, so actions within CARP that we're looking to move forward. Prior to getting into that, I do want to provide a little bit of context and talk and scale out globally for just a moment and talk about particularly one framing that we've seen. And so in 2018, the sort of the international governing body that releases reports on the status of climate change put out a report that essentially most people read as saying we have 12 years to figure out what we're going to do in terms of responding to the climate crisis. And so I do want to say that as we continue to look and think about how we prepare Evanston for the impacts of climate change, we also have to contend with a lot of global news and a lot of information that is brought into our community related to different projections. And one of the things we have to be careful about with climate change is that the condition is constantly changing. And so it's really important that we be thinking and planning and reviewing things iteratively as we move forward. And so this plan or this announcement, I think in some ways, unfortunately, it's probably not aggressive enough. And so the things we're going to talk about tonight may sound very aggressive, but the level of action that's required is quite stark. And so a couple other things that we just know, people probably have seen a lot of these types of slides, but historically, the 10 hottest years on record globally, look at how many of those are even within the last decade, and all of them are since 2005, 2019 being right up there, second to 2016. And so one thing I want to point out is that these numbers are averages. A lot of what we have to contend with climate change is that the changes are different in different times of year, different times of day, in different parts of the globe. And so in Evanston, we have a specific set of circumstances we have to think about as well. Additionally, the number of days where we've had an extreme heat index since 1979 through 2018 has increased by 2. That may not sound like a lot, but it is demonstrating that the climate impacts that we're feeling some of them already. The globe is warming. We're seeing those trends looking back. Even if you look back at some of the data from 1900 to today, we've seen some huge shifts in things like precipitation and temperature changes. Additionally, the way in which we're going to experience precipitation, so rain and snow and sleet events, is going to change. It'll be different in the winter and in the spring than it will be in the summer. And so one of the things we'll see is that temperature increases is we may see a shift in the winter precipitation. So we may have more rain or sleet and freezing thaw conditions than we've seen historically. We know that can be a challenge. We're also likely to see more intense rain events. So we may have more periods of time or longer periods of time between large storms, but when we do have those storms, they're likely to be much more intense, which our sewer system is not designed to handle, even though it is a very well set up sewer system. Additionally, some things we don't normally think about, but with the average temperature increasing, we also see the allergy season and the growing season shift and change. And that's really important for a couple things. One, because allergens can trigger health issues like triggering asthma and things like that, but also because it indicates that pests and other things like that might not necessarily go through the deep freeze and be killed off. And so that can certainly have an impact for vector-borne illnesses, but also things like invasive species and threats to our natural habitat. I'm going to move here. And then again, thinking about temperature. So disease danger days is essentially just a correlation between temperature and vector-borne illness from things like bugs and mosquitoes and things like that. And so we know that the warmer it is, the more days we're likely to have where we have more susceptible risk to mosquito-borne illnesses and things like that. So moving forward, see what I can get. I did want to just take one moment to talk a little bit about the lake. And so we've been seeing these videos, people have seen firsthand. We're talking a lot about lake levels in particular. We're at a sort of a historic high. But the other thing that we're also seeing is a warming of the Great Lakes overall, and of Lake Michigan in particular. And so that can have impacts on fisheries and biodiversity, which can impact water quality, which we know can impact recreation and access to the beaches. But it also changes winter ice cover, and that can impact lake levels. And so, although it's very difficult to project out into the future what the changes in lake levels will be long term, one of the things that does seem to be clearer is that we're likely to see more extreme ranges. And so we're likely to see higher lake levels than we've seen historically, but also potentially much lower lake levels than we've seen. That fluctuation is likely to increase or broaden as we move forward. And so this is just a picture of the lakefront. This is a screenshot from one of the videos that the Evanston Police Department took. I'm sure you all have seen lots of these videos and images, but it really sort of brings home the impact locally and what we're talking about and what we're experiencing and feeling. So the climate action plan really has dozens of goals in it, but we've sort of broken it out into these 4 big areas. The first is the one I've been talking about, preparing Evanston for the impacts of the climate crisis. We have a 100% renewable energy goal, community-wide zero waste by 2050, and then carbon neutrality by 2050. And so the policies I'm going to talk about are going to sort of line back up with those. But before I get into those, I do just want to mention that we have been making a lot of progress in terms of emissions reductions. So I want to just say that there is a lot of great work that's been done. The blue line indicates sort of the emissions reductions that we have achieved. The green line shows where we have to go, and the numbers on the left-hand side are metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and so that's how we measure our greenhouse gas emissions in Evanston annually. And so we got a long way to go, and we do have to accelerate what we're doing. This slide is focusing on a sort of an overview of some of the very higher level climate hazards. And so, again, thinking back to extreme heat and precipitation, we were fortunate enough to have some localized data that we received through a study in 2017 that has helped us identify some of these dominant climate hazards, and we use that in the planning process. We also then created a short list. There's certainly, you could add to this, but a list of some of the impacts. So as we look at those hazards, what type of impact do we think that will have? And so thinking about things like the type of stress that our infrastructure will feel. I put some question marks here around human migration, because we know that geographically, and particularly because of our more moderate climate and our access to fresh water, that there likely will be a human migration impact in Evanston and in the Chicago region, because it is such a desirable place to live, particularly as sea level rise continues to increase and other places have more extreme heat issues. So I want to get into the 8 policies that we're talking about this evening. And so the first of which is the concept of phasing out the use of single-use plastics. And so the plan has a goal of getting to zero waste by 2050. When we talk about single-use plastics, there are numerous sort of individual policies that may be included in that. One of them would be the disposable shopping bag ban, also thinking about takeout containers and styrofoam. And so those are all sort of considered a part of that single-use plastics. And so taking what we'd like to do is a comprehensive approach, so that if we're primarily working with retail establishments and businesses and restaurants, we're not bringing 1 or 2 policies here and there that may impact them, but we're actually talking with them and working through a group of policies and phasing them in effectively. And so that's what number 1 is focused on. Number 2 is building off of our existing energy and water benchmarking ordinance. And so that ordinance just requires that buildings track and report their annual energy and water data. And so this would be moving to push them to meet specific emissions reduction requirements. If we're going to meet our 2050 goal and our 100% renewable energy goal and our energy consumption reduction goals, we need to see performance improvements from buildings. And one of the things that we know, and I have some additional slides if you have time for it, is that the majority of energy consumption, electricity and natural gas in Evanston, is actually from our largest buildings. And so working with them to require that they move in this direction is a critical part of achieving the goals in the plan. Universal compost and recycling access. And so one of the things that we have noticed through some of our recent contract negotiations and looking at what services we're providing from a composting standpoint and recycling standpoint is that there are a large number of accounts in Evanston that don't have any recycling service, let alone composting service. There's a variety of reasons for why that is the case, but addressing this from an access standpoint and thinking about everyone in Evanston should have equal access to these services is one way to also help us get to some of those zero waste goals as well. And so this would be looking at both commercial and residential accounts. The Environmental Justice Resolution, which has been working its way through the Environment Board and the Equity and Empowerment Commission, this is a goal in CARP. There's been a working group that has had multiple iterations, but formed back in 2016 with my predecessor, and they now have a draft resolution that has been passed back to city staff to draft and to bring to planning and development for discussion, hopefully here shortly. And so the other half of them are renegotiating our franchise electric agreement. And so Evanston, as with many communities in Illinois and in ComEd's territory, has a standing agreement with our incumbent electric provider, ComEd, to allow them to operate in our city and in our right of way. And in return for that, we also get free electricity or no cost electricity to the city. There's also key pieces of that have been utilized in the past to improve reliability of service throughout the city. And so we are looking at this as an opportunity to open up a conversation with our utility provider to work to have them more strongly support our renewable energy goals as well. Updating our electricity aggregation program. The city has participated and had an active aggregation program since about 2011. And so that program has been incredibly effective at purchasing and supplying renewable energy through renewable energy credits to residential properties. But there are other models of programs throughout the country in other states that have this legislation that allow greater authority for cities to supply renewable energy and provide other services to not just residential accounts. And so it's time that we take a look at this program and the service and think about how we can improve it moving forward. Limiting natural gas in new buildings. So about 40% of Evanston's greenhouse gas emissions come just from burning natural gas in buildings in Evanston. And so natural gas presents a myriad of challenges as a utility service, but also from a health and safety standpoint. Primarily from sort of CARB's perspective, though, is thinking about even if we get to 100% renewable energy, meaning or renewable electricity, we're purchasing solar and wind, that still leaves a huge chunk of building emissions that have not been addressed. And so we need to develop a strategy to work on reducing and moving forward with reducing natural gas in new buildings and existing buildings. And then the last one is creating guidelines for electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Evanston. And so we have dozens of charging stations in Evanston. The city owns and manages 6 of them. And so we have really excellent data on utilization related to that, but we don't really have policies guiding how someone accesses them, how turnover is supposed to happen. So if someone's squatting at a station, we don't really have guidelines that are enforced to move them off once they're done charging. We also don't have a dedicated revenue stream to pay for and support that infrastructure and expand it, especially in places that may not otherwise have EV charging infrastructure. We've seen a massive increase in participation in using our stations, and we've seen a huge jump in the number of electric vehicles that are registered in Evanston in the past few years. And so it's certainly time for us to develop some policies and guidelines to help support, but also make sure we're planning effectively for that new type of infrastructure that someone has to maintain and manage. So those are the policies that we're here to talk about this evening. I do, at the end of this, as you'll see posted, have a group of reference slides that go into a little bit more detail. I'd be glad to refer to them if there are questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kumar. I'm going to open it up for discussions and conversations from the council. So we'll start from there. Alderman Fleming.
Yes, thank you. I'm interested more in the timeline. I know this has been, a while in progress, particularly for things like the phasing out single-use plastics. I know that there's lots of communities that have done that, and it seems like it has gone okay. And so I'm interested to see. I know you're talking about the comprehensive, so if you do takeout containers, that's another that's a whole other thing. But I guess I'm interested to hear the timeline for that, and if there's a way we can phase it in a little more quickly. The other question I have is about the universal compost and recycling. So I know you mentioned access, which I appreciate, but I'm interested also in any kind of requirement. So particularly now that we have the yard waste where you can put in your composting, it's hard to monitor that necessarily, but being at those large buildings downtown and knowing that some of them only have the 65 gallon or whatever it is containers for recycling, and thinking about how much paper is getting thrown out every day, is there a way that we can actually make that a mandatory, that they have to have a larger recycling container, at least for paper, to get us started? And then I'm very supportive of all of these. I mean, some I feel like are more important in my mind than others, and are maybe easier for us to go ahead and move forward with a little bit faster. So thank you for bringing those forward, but I'd be really interested to look at some kind of timeline if you have one.
Right. So we don't have necessarily a timeline for the single-use plastics phase-in, the ban, but I think what we would like to do is we've gotten a lot of feedback on some of the specific policies that might be included in sort of a group of phasing out of single-use plastics. And so as you mentioned, some of them might be much easier. So the disposable shopping bag ban, as it's currently written, certainly needs an update and needs to be incorporated, but I would consider that to be sort of something that could be done sort of immediately, where it's very clear what the issues are with that policy, and we now have good examples from other communities as to how they've gotten around that. And so that's one example of something that I'd say we don't really need a ton of additional research to move forward on that. Things that I think get a little bit more complicated, and there needs to be more of a strategy around what the right phasing is, would be how do you deal with either mandating, recyclable or compostable takeout containers. And so one of the challenges with mandating recyclable or plastic takeout containers is that a lot of times those containers are going to have food on them. And so that is also a potential contaminant you're now newly introducing to your recycling stream. And so I think it's worth it to have a conversation about whether or not you just move directly to compostable or reusable containers with, maybe not for takeout, but certainly for within house. And so I think those are some of the nuances that need to be talked out, particularly internally, but also in conversation with the composting access policy as well. We don't want to necessarily require compostable or recyclable if there aren't recycling or composting options for that business, because then you're just throwing that out as well. And so that's some of the conversation that I think still needs to happen. But there are ample examples. We've already done a fair amount of policy research on some of the examples from other communities. And so we feel pretty ready to have those conversations. Moving on to the universal compost and recycling access, from a commercial standpoint, we have about 1,200 commercial garbage and recycling or garbage counts in Evanston, and they account for 50% of all waste generated in Evanston. And so 40% of them don't have a single recycling container. And so very comfortable requiring a certain level of recycling, particularly because at the moment with our current contract, which is expiring this year, for a 1-yard garbage container picked up once a week versus a 1-yard recycling container picked up once a week, the recycling container is cheaper every single time. And so there's a cost incentive already built into that contract. Commercial accounts are also able to receive 195-gallon, which is not enough for most of them, but 195-gallon recycling container at no cost. And 40% of them are not participating in that. There's a variety of reasons why. Some of that is, I think, education, and some of that is our current hauler and the communication that they have. But I think there's absolutely space there to pretty quickly move forward and in alignment with a potential new contract with a commercial hauler to say, look, we'll make a requirement that they participate or that they have the service, and then it's on the hauler to make sure they're providing that effectively. From a composting standpoint, I think we would want to look specifically at the largest food waste generators first and work with them to work on a requirement from that standpoint, rather than focusing on residential and the about 20,000 accounts that we have there. I think there's a way to phase that in and think about what that would look like, particularly with the food and yard waste program. But about 45% of eligible customers are not participating in the food and yard waste program, and so we need some little bit of more information as to why and what the city could do to encourage and support that participation.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Alderman Ravel, then Alderman Nguyen.
Well, Kumar, thank you so much for all the amazing work that you managed to do. I know you have a couple of interns maybe helping you, but you're just accomplishing an amazing amount for us all. And you've clearly thought through a lot of the immediate next steps we need to take to start implementing some more policies that are going to help us achieve our really aggressive goals. I think the challenge is going to come to those of us up here on the dais to be willing to approve a lot of the changes that you're going to be recommending. We're going to be asking the community to step up and do their part, and so we're going to be imposing requirements and making changes, and that's always difficult for us to agree to, and then difficult for us to communicate with the community. So when we think back to the initial slides you showed us at the clearly we have a crisis, and we all need to be ready to do our part. And I would say to the folks who came tonight, particularly our students, we need you to hold us accountable. And also, I know a lot of you are part of various organizations that you can work with. I think it's really easy for people to just get overwhelmed with those initial slides and just say, oh, it's just hopeless. But I think if all of us can find an organization or some kind of way to get involved and really feel that you're contributing to addressing this crisis, I think that will energize all of us in a good way and help us all move forward to maintaining Evanston's really strong leadership role in sustainability. So Kumar, thank you so much, and we look forward to the first set of ordinances.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, I echo Alderman Revelle and Alderman Fleming. Thank you so much, Kumar, for everything that you've done and continue to do. It's really impressive. So I have just a couple of points. One, how much more staffing do you need? Because clearly you can't do this on your own, right? Looking at this list, I can take a guess, but so I think we need to know that on the council. And then two, when I'm looking at these, and I'm trying to figure out what it is I want, it's like, what are the first 5 things that we should do, and then, or almost like a matrix.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can we do immediately? That would have the greatest impact, but also then obviously things are going to get banning natural gas in buildings is way down that list in difficulty and how we can do that. But a number of these things, as you said, we can do immediately. Right. And with the waste hauling contract coming up right away this year, that's a fantastic opportunity to do a lot of this stuff. And the electric franchise agreement coming up. So if I don't want to make you do any extra work, but is it possible for you to give us, the council and the public, the list, in order of what we can do, and then the intensity in terms of how the impact that we'll get. So, and I can read all this and gradually figure that out, but if you could give us things that we'll say, okay, this, and then that, and then this. Right. So that's one thing. And then in terms of, this is much more specific, so this is very helpful. I've already forwarded it to a number of people I know. So if the franchise agreement is coming up, could we negotiate with them to have them provide charging stations for us rather than us pay for them and do something like that?
Absolutely. I think there's an opportunity to ask for a lot. There's also examples from other communities where they will develop a partner agreement alongside their franchise agreement. And so they'll tie those two agreements together. But oftentimes what you'll see is sort of reliability and infrastructure and benefit portions will be codified in the franchise agreement. And then this partnership agreement will speak to other things. Specifically, some other communities talk about, like EV charging, energy efficiency, workforce programs, working with and supporting low-income and low-income assistance programs. And so there's some really excellent examples that we can draw from in this process. So I think there's a lot we can certainly think about and determine what our priorities are for that particular group of services. I also just want to make a note that it is really sort of good timing that agreement and our aggregation agreement are expiring in the same year because those are both our two largest sort of energy contracts related to community energy supply and planning. And so it gives us, although I will say that it takes a lot of time, but it does give us this opportunity to have this broader conversation about what it means to what we want our energy supply to look like in Evanston.
Yeah. Good. Please keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey.
Yes. Kumar, I was wondering, what would it take for us to have a plastic bag collection station on each block? I find that's to me is the most irritating thing, to have to collect all my little plastic bags and drag them out to Jewel or Valley or wherever. And sometimes, no matter how dedicated I want to be, I find when nobody's looking, I just stick. I know. I think of you every time I do it. But it's just so, if we just had a plastic bag collection, a big plastic bag collector in every alley, I'll just bet they would get filled every single day, or at least every single week. I would like you to think about that. It would be kind of unique. Second of all, I have something a little more serious, although that's very serious. One of the problems with our franchise agreement with ComEd, and I don't know where the other franchise agreements are in the ComEd district, that
The territory.
we are the only ones that aren't in the big franchise.
Correct.
We opted out years ago, and I served on all the franchise committees. One of the problems with the big franchise, which we're not in, is it has a most favored nations clause in it. So whatever we get, everybody else has to get. So we can't get charging stations from ComEd without everybody else getting it that has a franchise with ComEd that's in our region, or that is in a franchise that we should be part of. They allowed us to opt out, and I know people who've been around a while will know that. So that's always been a problem, because we could never get anything special, even though we are special, and we did have a special agreement with them, the short-term franchises. And interestingly today, and I didn't read it, and maybe you did, Lori Lightfoot announced that she might want to buy ComEd, their franchise out,
Right.
which would be interesting, because if you do that, then you have to buy the poles and the wires,
Absolutely.
And we talked about that years ago. I don't know if you've read the history. And then we discovered that they would be kind of costly to repair and to maintain, so we changed our mind. I think Paul was around back then. And I know that Dick Lanyon, who's on the current Utilities Committee, was around then.
Right.
So,
Yeah. We're certainly watching what Chicago's doing. We're the only two municipalities in the region that our agreements expire this year.
Yeah.
And so.
We're the only one, I'm sure, because we're not part.
Right.
Nobody else did what we did.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other discussion or direction, City Manager?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to sort of give this overview tonight, because a lot of the policies that we're going to need to enact, if we're going to meet the goals of this plan, we're going to need to do semi-aggressively. So part of that is a process of educating the community about why we're doing it, and then part of it is actually figuring out the sequencing of all of these things, and then, like Alderman Fleming was talking about, what can we do first, what can we do second, and how quickly can we move forward on many of these plans. So I'm very encouraged by the discussion tonight. Kumar and I will go back and discuss some more based on the feedback we've received. I also wanted to mention that Brittany Giroux is here tonight, and I would like for her to stand up and be recognized for her assistance on this as well. She is our AmeriCorps Fellow, and she is working with Kumar as part of this effort, and her addition to the team has been an excellent addition. So I appreciate her work as well. So thank you, Kumar, and we'll have more to come.
Great. Thank you. Great. So in terms of more to come, again, this was a presentation of everything. We got feedback from the council. The more to come will actually be, ordinances coming before us. Okay. All right. Terrific. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. The next item of business is SP3. This is our last one before we get to the consent agenda, and this is on the city manager recruitment schedule. Is there a motion to move this item? Second? Okay, so this item's now up for discussion. We have with us, if you all recall, we contracted with GovHR. Heidi Voorhees, who is the president of GovHR, is here tonight, and we are going to talk about the recruitment schedule. It was in our packet, and the process that she is suggesting, and then we'll have a conversation about that. So welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me, Mayor Haggerty and members of the City Council. You have before you a proposed schedule. It starts really in a couple of weeks with stakeholder meetings and individual meetings with each of you to learn what you would be seeking in the next city manager. I'd work with your designee to set up those meetings and then make sure that the community is fully aware of them and able to participate. We also suggest a survey be available so that if people are unable to attend the meeting but would like to comment, they would be able to complete a survey. And finally, a third method is a dedicated email that would come to our offices. So if folks had other comments that maybe weren't covered by the survey or they were unable to attend one of the meetings, they would be able to contact us that way. And of course, we would always also be available by telephone. So there's many ways for input into the process, and I would propose starting that in the next couple of weeks. We want to be sure we give people enough time to be available for the meetings, and of course we have to find locations and that sort of thing. So, it could be the end of that week or the following week after that. After that, then, sure.
Heidi, can I just stop you there? Because
Sure.
I think that's a really important piece of this, and I just want to open this up to the council. So what you're saying is sort of the initial period is gathering all of this feedback. You're going to do that with 2 public meetings that you all would facilitate, if I'm reading this right, 2 public evening meetings.
Correct.
With one-on-one meetings with each of the elected officials up here, and then with focus groups with representatives from business community, faith community, nonprofits, service communities, all of that. Additionally, there would be a survey that we would have out there to collect input. So I just want to open it up. I think that's just a really important point. It's something we've heard from the public. How are we going to be involved and just get feedback from the council members on that? Alderman Fleming.
Yeah, so I have a few questions. One, what is your ability to translate and also communicate with our Spanish-speaking population?
I hadn't thought about that, but I personally am not fluent in Spanish, so we would have to see if we could find a translator who could assist at those meetings.
Okay, so I think that would be something that I would highly recommend. We've heard a lot from our community. We have some issues already in our service not being in Spanish, so at the meetings or a separate meeting that is in Spanish, particularly if you're going to have a survey, that would also be in Spanish so people can, if they don't come to meeting, can communicate their thoughts. I think we have a growing Spanish-speaking population we need to be mindful of. Also, who would be selecting or identifying the stakeholders?
That's really up to the city council. I suggested some broad groups, but it's really the city council's decision with respect. And I think what I'm suggesting and what I've seen work well in the past is specific invitations to different organizations in the community that might like to attend a meeting or a focus group specifically available to them. We found in the past that if you just have open meetings, you get some people do attend, and I know Evanston's a very engaged community, but we also think that it's very helpful to reach out to organizations, community groups, nonprofits, certain sectors of the community, and make sure that they feel welcomed and invited to attend. So those can occur. Those can occur during the day if it works for some folks, like some of the local school districts or, the business community, that may work better for them. And then the evening meetings could be more open so that anybody who wants to can attend and participate at that point in time.
Okay, so just because we have a lot of active people, so we have your 2 public meetings, which is just public, whoever walks in the door.
Right.
So I guess for these focus groups, we have a lot of people who would consider themselves important stakeholders.
Absolutely.
And so I think that we want to really be mindful that it is not just the who's who that you see at the chamber or whatever other event in town, but we really are reaching out to people, whether they come or not, who we see participate here, particularly here who come to city council, who have been watching this process. There's just a lot of people, and I would be concerned that people would be left out if we kind of stick to kind of these traditional identities that you have here. And I know these are just an example that you gave, but I want to be very mindful of that as well.
I mean, just along those lines, if you're talking about, making sure that people's voices who we hear, regularly at the city council meetings, we could add that potentially as another group that they are, meeting with, a focus group, if you wanted.
Well, I don't, some of those people are probably going to come to public meeting. I just think if you have here, which again, understanding that you have laid out here very traditional groups, but this is a community of people, of lots of involved people. Right. And so to say that, Joe Blow needs to go to the public committee meeting, which anybody can go to the public meetings, but, Joe Blow then and his whatever group he represents doesn't have an invitation for a focus group. I just wanted to make sure that this, again, is as inclusive as possible. So even if people decide not to come, that we are sure to invite people who should be invited.
Absolutely. And that's the purpose of tonight, is for all of you to contribute to this list. It was just, right.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey.
I was just going to suggest that we have a responsibility to bring in people to this, and we all have newsletters and, email addresses. We can let people know this is happening. It seems to me that when something big or controversial is going on, we're able to generate a crowd. So I think we'll be able to do this. Yeah.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Sufferton.
Sure. I had asked Deputy City Attorney Cummings this question, so it may not be fair to ask you, but he's left the room. Do you think that your communications on behalf of the City of Evanston are subject to FOIA?
Our communications on behalf of the city of Evanston?
Yeah, if you're sending emails to people as part of this search, will those be subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act?
It is my understanding that they are not.
Okay. Is that based on the contract you have with the city, or?
No, it's based on previous experience working in the state of Illinois.
Okay.
Personnel.
All right, I had asked Nick about that, and he's gone. So I think there's also going to be a concern, no matter how transparent we are, there's going to be people who, sorry, Nick, I know where he went now. I apologize. But I think there's always going to be a concern that there's a lack of transparency, no matter how transparent we are. Nick, I'm sorry to do this to you, man. I was asking the question about the Freedom of Information Act, and whether it's your understanding that their communications on behalf of the City of Evanston would be subject to disclosure under FOIA.
There is nothing that I saw in the contract between the GovHR and the city that makes them an agent of the city, so their documents would not be subject to FOIA. Okay. Communications with the city back and forth might be, but not their individual documentation.
Okay. I just want to lay down a marker that I anticipate that could be a source of problems later.
Well, if I could, our communications with candidates are pretty benign. It's, we're conducting a recruitment on behalf of the city of Evanston. Attached is the recruitment brochure. Please contact us if you have any questions. They apply, we contact them again and say, we're impressed with your credentials. We'd like to set up an opportunity to, learn more about your background, that type of thing. They're not.
I understand that. We just all work for the same people.
That's all really the nature of those types of communications.
There's residents of the city of Evanston who may have issues with that. I'm just letting you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Seffernan. Alderman Rainey?
Well, they couldn't be subject to FOIA until one of us was also included in the communication. I mean, if it's just between GovHR and a candidate, we can't FOIA that. Yeah.
Right.
But also, one of the problems with that, I mean, once you do communicate with us, is if imagine if an employer doesn't know that this person is searching for work, that is a little.
I understand.
That's a personnel issue. Anyway, that's not my problem. That's your candidate's problem. But that's too bad.
Thank you. Any other comments or suggestions on outreach, which is the first piece? Okay, seeing none, go on, Heidi, with the next.
So once we complete the outreach and have met with each of you individually, we'll draft a position announcement, which is a shorter version of a full recruitment brochure, and that would be placed on numerous websites and utilized in social media to start getting the word out about the opportunity. Concurrently with that, we'll be developing the recruitment brochure, also for your approval, as is the position announcement. In that recruitment brochure is usually a 4 to 6 page document with color pictures showcasing Evanston, but also talking about the community, talking about the challenges that you've all identified, things that we've heard about in the focus groups and in the public meetings, all synthesized into this document that we can then share with potential candidates. And we do that in a variety of ways. We pay to subscribe to a database of city managers across the country so that we're able to, and we can parse that data so we can zero in on the people in the types of communities and the size and the complexity similar to Evanston that might be interested in the opportunity. We also do personal outreach. We work in 32 different states. We have consultants all over the country, so we have the opportunity to reach out personally to folks that we think might be interested. And then we do the email blasts and then the constant social media pushes to make sure that people are aware of the opportunity. So that's kind of the outreach portion, and wanting to make sure that folks are aware that this position is available. I've already had calls on it and already had folks expressing interest. So the drums are starting to beat a little bit out there about the opportunity. And then once the candidates have applied, and then I would go through and look at each and every resume and cover letter and make sure that, I understand the background of each person who's applied. Sometimes we find that things are buried deep in resumes, and I always cast a broader net. And then we do video interviews of each of the finalist candidates, those that we think show promise for continuing to compete in the process. And then we also do media reviews, we do social media reviews, we do reference calls, and make sure that we know as much about each candidate's background as possible, so that when I sit down and meet with you and go over the recruitment report, I can give you as full of a background about each of the candidates as information is available. And then you all decide who you want to interview. We facilitate the interviews and then go through the interview process. So that's a very quick overview. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You said something that piqued my curiosity. Talk to me a little bit about, or our council, what is a social media review?
Oh, we look at their social media presence,
Okay.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things that they've, put out on social media. just really just to not be surprised by anything that.
Is that, someone once told me this within the last week that that's now illegal. I couldn't imagine why. I don't understand that at all. What's the current best practice
I should
on
say
that?
we do not ask them to sign into their Facebook
Of course.
page. We just are looking at what's in the public domain
Right.
that
I
anybody
get
could
that.
find.
Like we will do.
If you want to come to them, thank you.
Jennifer Lynn, HR Division Manager. If an employer was requiring an applicant to submit username and profile information, that part is illegal.
Okay.
But if we are simply Google searching them and looking to see if they are spouting off crazy things or saying things that might be very unpopular, just like Heidi was saying, just to be well prepared so that we are able to address any of that issue. So that's something that we are doing in HR
Standard
as well.
practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming.
I have one more quick question. So thinking about the outreach part again, so you're compiling all this information. Are you compiling in a way that it will be given to council, or are you just compiling it for your own knowledge when you make the recruitment position description?
You would certainly be welcome to the data that comes from the survey, and we'll be taking notes from all of the focus groups and sessions, which you are welcome to have copies of those as well.
Yeah, I think if you can compile that, I mean, I know I would be interested in it, and I think that might be something that also our citizen base will be interested in. Not that it's going to impact their role in this process, but just so people really have an understanding of the amount of outreach we're doing and the amount of information we're gathering, and then that is actually being translated in some way, in a tangible way, into the
Right.
job description and the person we're looking for. Obviously, everything someone brings up is not going to translate into something that's in the job description, but I think it's very important that people understand that you are collecting the feedback and that we are receiving it and that it is being used in a way, hopefully, to find the best candidate.
Yeah, the only caveat I would give is that sometimes, we do say if people want to send us a confidential email.
Well, obviously,
we
yes.
we can share the email, but we would redact.
As
So
I would
that-
assume you would, just as
Yeah,
if you're
just-
having one-on-one conversations with us, you might surmise what the council said versus Alderman Fleming said X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
Other questions, comments about the process, suggestions? All right, how about this question? We are going to have executive session tonight. Does anyone, would you like Heidi to stick around? Is there anything specific in executive session you need to talk about? All right, okay. Okay.
So Alderman Sufford and I recognize your concern about transparency in the process. As HR, I'm very concerned about the integrity of the process and the confidentiality of the process. So I believe that if we are requiring that, or at least requesting that GovHR make the applications public, and if you're wanting to discuss this information in public, it's going to be very important to have a disclaimer at the posting period that applicants should understand that their applications are going to be made publicly available. I think that disclaimer would severely discourage some folks to apply, just like Alderman Rainey was talking about. Some of these folks are applying, their employers don't know that they're applying. So if something happens, if y'all are discussing it in open session, if y'all are discussing it, if the media gets wind of who's applied, this could significantly affect their current employment. That could increase the city's liability for tortious interference with contract and other types of things. So I am concerned about the publicity and the public information that's accessible. So I really want to maintain the integrity of the process as well.
All right, well, let's make sure we all, because I heard some questions asked, but I didn't hear necessarily a strong opinion on anything. Alderman Zuercher.
Sure. I mean, I appreciate that. So how do we, what's the balance, right? If there's no point in having impeccably credentialed candidates who get to Evanston and then see the people who live in the city that they're going to be managing and realize this is not an environment in which I can do my job. So how do we make it clear from the start that this isn't just a best resume contest, that we're actually looking for someone who can manage the city and the residents that live here? We all understand that it's an active and vocal community. How can we not discourage qualified applicants from applying, but still have a process that's open enough and representative of the experience that the city manager would ultimately have if they were hired?
I think that's what y'all's goal is, right? So y'all have been elected by your constituents to best represent their needs. So during the focus groups, during these community meetings, these residents will come in and share with the city and share with all of you what they want in their next city manager. And then it's ultimately up to y'all to decide who the best qualified candidate is. So publicly releasing that information won't necessarily garner you the best candidate. It is y'all using your best expertise, your interests, your constituents' concerns and issues, and using those to the best of your abilities to select from the greatest pool of candidates to decide who's going to be the next city manager. So I think that's what y'all are here for. That's what y'all been elected to do. And I think that the process, if done confidentially, if done with integrity, will result in a great candidate. I think confidentiality has been an issue with city council and with the city over the last several months. So I'm really concerned that the confidentiality of these applicants won't be breached. It's very important that we maintain as HR a good reputation for that type of process. So I respect Heidi and the work that she does. I think that if we do it right, we will have the next greatest candidate and the next greatest city manager here.
Do you or Heidi think that it would be an impediment to getting the best possible candidates to have a public meeting when we get down to 3 finalists, or when we're down to a point where, I mean, other committees have done that, where when they get to the bottom of the funnel, like those people would have to meet with the public. Is that something?
Yeah, I think the last sentence says the process will include a public forum for finalist candidates.
But
yeah.
Jennifer, to your point, I guess, when is the, right now we're not talking about people. We're just talking about like a composite wish list of traits.
Right.
When do we need to not, and we presume that anybody who's applying has some job right now and may have varying degrees of their current employer understanding that they're looking for another job. But how do we balance the public's interest in knowing this is the most important, this is more important than any of us up here. This is the person who actually runs the city. How do we balance their right to have input with the applicant's right to some level of confidentiality? But at a certain point, they're applying to be the CEO of a giant city, and they're going to be exposed publicly if they're one of the finalists.
Well, I think that's what we were trying to do by saying 3 finalists, or I don't know if it's 3 or if it's 4 or if it's 2. I'm not sure what that number is. It'll be up to you all to decide, who you want to put forward for a public forum. But I think that's the balance we're trying to strike, because I know from previous experience that if you have 7 people, you're definitely going to have qualified people drop out, because they're thinking, okay, my chances are 1 in 7. Is it worth it to me to put my job at risk? Which honestly is what happens. But if they're one of 3, then they might think, okay, it's worth it, for me to be, in a public arena applying for this position. So I think that was the balance.
Okay. Because one of the biggest factors is how this person will be able to interact with the community.
Absolutely.
And we're not going to know that based on anything until they do.
Right.
So how do we,
yeah, and
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, that was the purpose of putting that last part in.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite and then Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Alderman Sufferton, for sharing your thoughts. And so I see our responsibility, our collective responsibility here to hire the right city manager, something we all take very seriously. And so my specific thought just regarding the issue that Alderman Sufferton raised is, I'm sure you and all of us behind this dais at one point has interviewed for a position. And so I realize that the position of a city manager and any other public employee here, we're responsible for the public. At the same time, I would like to add that I would think that any individual applying for this position, until you get to the finalist spot, there is no reason to, from my perspective, to release their names. Absolutely not whatsoever. I've interviewed, I've been a person who's interviewed, and I think just as a matter of privacy, until they get to the finalist position, and we've been to that position with our city manager, our former city manager, that when he got to a final position, he, out of a courtesy, mentioned to us that, hey, I am applying for that position, and I am fine with that process. And I've already opened the door we started talking about this process at my last ward meeting. I'll continue to, and I encourage you to do the same, Alderman Suffredin. Reach out to your residents and ask them what's important. But if any of my residents want to know, like, the 250 resumes that are coming in or however many, I think that's a waste of my time as well as yours. So I just feel that it's important that I state that.
Right, and if there were, to reiterate what Ms. Lynn said, that if we were going to potentially release that information, we absolutely need to tell people at the outset that even, that their application could be public. But we don't have to do that. It gives you an advantage in recruiting in what is a difficult recruiting environment right now. So I would take that advantage to maintain the confidentiality of the applications.
Great.
Thank you.
Alderman Fisk.
What's the difficult in a recruiting environment?
Well, it's just, it's a full employment economy, which always makes it more challenging in the public sector. But the sheer numbers of, the boomer generation is retiring at a quick pace, and the generation that is coming up, that cohort that's probably the most well qualified for this position, is, about a third smaller. So there just are not enough people with the years and the time in as the generation ahead of them. So we're seeing difficulties in finding talent for, positions across the board. I mean, that's it's been going on for a few years, but it's not unusual right now for communities to really struggle with filling their top job or some of their more significant technical positions.
All right, thank you. I think we had a good conversation up here. I think people are good with this process that you laid out, and we'll make sure to start getting the word out to all of our residents and constituents, and look
And
forward
I'll
to
work
beginning
with your
this
staff
process.
on starting to set up the meetings.
Okay.
All right.
And just
Thank
so,
you.
I just want to, I guess I make one point clear. So when we talk about you working with our staff, that is with our HR director,
correct.
Jennifer Lynn. And I just want to make sure that's all clear, because to my right is our interim city manager, and she'll have to decide if this is a job she wants to apply for or not. So she will not be involved in those conversations that we're having as a council.
And that is not an unusual situation in our experience. So we are, I'm very comfortable with that division.
Okay, great.
Thank you all.
And so Heidi, you don't need to stick around. We're not going to have you at executive session tonight, so get a good night's sleep. All right, we're going to now move on to the consent agenda. So we'll follow the process we've been following this year, which is I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to look at the consent agenda and let me know what you'd like to remove from the consent agenda so we can discuss it.
A16 and A18, please.
All right, A16 and A18.
And P5, P5.
18P5.
P2 is off. It was tabled in committee.
I'm sorry,
P2 is tabled in committee.
Was tabled in committee. Okay. A18 and A16 are off. P5 is off.
What's that?
I'm sorry, I didn't see P and D. Is P1 off or on?
No, he said P2 was held in
P2.
committee.
Okay.
P1 is off. P5 was already taken off, yep. All right, P7 is off. Any other items that anyone would like off? All right, so the ones that have been taken off this evening are, shoot, I wrote them all. Let me just go through, I circled them all and took them off. A16 is off, A18 is off, P1 is off, P2 is off, P5 and P7 are off. Okay, so those are the items that are removed. Now, were there any items that had a suspension of the rules? Yes. There were. Okay, so would someone like to move suspending the rules and allowing for introduction and action? I'm sorry? It was P3. Well, again, we've now done it two different ways. So what we did, what we were doing at one point was removing, or basically taking a vote on all items where items were being suspended and allowing for introduction and action. If it's only one item, we can just take it off and do the vote.
I think there's just the one, so.
All right, so if it's P3, let's take P3.
Move suspension of the rules as to P3, ordinance 31020.
Okay, there's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. P3, the rule's been suspended, allowing for introduction and action. Okay. So City Clerk, could you please take the roll on the consent agenda?
Alderman Sufferton.
Aye.
Alderman Ravel. Alderman Rainey. Alderman Fleming. Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
All right, so I got 1, 2, 3, 6. All right, so the consent agenda passes the Evanston City Council this evening on a 6-0 vote, with Alderman Braithwaite and Nguyen being absent.
I thought we just voted for suspending the rules.
No, we did that by voice vote.
Got it.
Yep. So Nguyen and Braithwaite were absent from that vote. Unless you two, were you both voting in favor of it? Okay, let the record show that consent agenda passes on an 8-0 vote. Okay, we're now going to move to the items that were removed from the agenda. Alderman Sufferton, could you take us to the first one, which I think was A16, or excuse me, A.
I'm the chairman of AMPW.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you should be. My mistake, Alderman Rainey. A16, Alderman Rainey.
A16 is ordinance 19-020, amending Title 10, Chapter 11, Section 10, limited parking. It has to do with parking on Central Street and Hurd Avenue. That has been tabled. I move approval.
Wait, it's been tabled?
I'm sorry. It's
been tabled.
It's held to a date
Not-
certain, sorry.
We tabled it. You tabled it.
Yeah, we held it to September 14th after we get the
September
full
14th.
comprehensive parking study.
So it's still a committee?
Seconded.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah. I was just
at
saying-
committee and held until September 24th?
14th.
September 14th, okay, 2020. So that item's been held, okay. All right, A18, Alderman Rainey?
Yes. A18 is ordinance 24-020, amending section 7293, having to do with sidewalks to be cleared of snow, ice, dirt, and weeds. I move approval.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Second. Okay. All right, this item's open for conversation. Alderman Wilson?
Thank you. I've heard from a number of people in the community about the it's being referred to as a zero tolerance provision, and honestly, that's the way it's written. So the way it's written says any accumulation of snow or ice has to be removed, and honestly, I don't know anybody in the city who gets all of the snow and ice off the sidewalks with 100% certainty. So I'm also uncomfortable with the amount of the fee structure. But I would be also interested in hearing, this wasn't brought up before, but hearing from our legal department on the Illinois generally has a proposition that home property owners are not responsible for natural accumulations of ice and snow. But there was a recent opinion I noticed in June of 2019, which I'd be happy to give to you, but the appellate court maybe changed that a little bit. But I'm interested to know how our change in this ordinance and this kind of zero tolerance provision might create additional liabilities for property owners. I don't want to do that. So I don't want to create a situation where not only are people potentially being fined, but if it's not perfectly done, that might create a liability situation for a homeowner or removal company for not doing it perfectly. In other words, if it's not in conformance with the law, that could arguably create a liability situation. So I don't feel comfortable supporting this. I realize we have a snowstorm coming, but at the same time, we have to balance, and I don't want to create more harm than we're preventing with this.
Okay. Thank you. Alderman Revelle, then Alderman Braithwaite.
I guess I have a couple of comments, and then I also have an amendment to propose. I too have heard concerns from residents about, the zero tolerance aspect of it. And I guess I was wondering, in terms of our enforcement plans, were we, for example, going to prioritize enforcement in the business district? Because that's particularly where I think we've had a number of concerns raised. And it's going to be a really big change for our residents to be required to, within 24 hours, immediately remove all the snow and ice. So I was wondering what kind of a grace period we're going to have with our residents so that they would have a chance to get used to the new ordinance if we approve it tonight. We currently provide a notice of violation and give residents yet another 24 hours to take care of the snow and ice. So I'd be interested in, I'd feel more comfortable if I knew what kind of, grace period we were going to offer to our residents.
Good evening, Johanna Leonard, Community Development Director. In terms of prioritization, we respond to complaints first. So we get complaints through 311, and those, we were just talking about this morning. We generally try to accept those after 24 hours after the snowfall to give people the time it takes to remove the snow. So I think I mentioned this last time, but the way we operate in our enforcement is we get the complaint, we go out, it probably is not a full, it's probably more than 24 hours after the snowfall because it's not like we're ready to go right at that marker. Go out, visit the site. At that point, we would issue a notice of violation that is not a ticket. It just says, here's the code, here's the penalty if you are found liable to have violated the code and you need to remove the snow. And our new and improved SNOTIS includes information about how to remedy your sidewalks if you don't have the ability to do that. So our volunteer opportunities and other things. So that's out there. Then they have another 24 hours to cure. And again, our staff will try to go out within that time, but if we have I think one of the snowfalls in January, we had something like 150 complaints. So we can't get to all of those at exactly 24 hours. So it's probably more than 48 hours now after the end of the snow event. And then at that point, if they return again after the 24 hours from the snow issue of notice of violation, then we could ticket. But even then, it's not like a parking ticket. You'd have to, there's a date set in the future for an administrative hearing, and then you could be found liable. But as I've learned from the inspectors, if people have made an attempt, sometimes the ice is hardened and it's not the zero tolerance of if you have one speck of ice or a few corners of snow left. if you made attempts, the hearing officers are generally forgiving and may not fine you if you cannot remove it. But in terms of, prioritization, commercial, residential, you're absolutely right. We have many commercial businesses, but we generally, our economic development team knows who is in violation of those, and we usually know who to go. Our business districts have been great about helping identify, so we can see if there's a certain landlord that has an issue, and then the multifamily properties are generally pretty good. But what we found is many of the single-family residential, the inspectors go out, they see that somebody has made some effort to clear. They've cleared their stairs, to their driveway, they've cleared some things so they can get to their vehicle or to wherever they need to go, but they haven't removed the snow in other parts of their property. So, and we get those complaints regularly for the same properties. There's probably a handful of people who are greater offenders than the rest. And we recognize that some people do go out of town in winter, and maybe they haven't made the arrangement, or their arrangement to remove snow may have fallen through, but that sometimes happens. So in terms of a grace period, maybe it won't snow again. It will have a nice spring, and it'll take a couple, some time to get all the ordinance, if it is adopted, signed. And then I think we also want to make sure that we're messaging and with community engagement. We will probably have to be, a built-in grace period just to getting the information out there. But we have been circulating the door hangers, and we printed new door hangers for, we're going to put them in the community center so people can pick them up if they'd like to use them to hang on their neighbors' doors. And we're also making it available online, so if people want to print it, they could print it at home, and because people just might not know the rules. They're new to the neighborhood, those sorts of things.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Mr. I guess I would say to members of council, you addressed two of my concerns. Number one is making sure that we're focused on our business districts, and I think you've satisfied that. And number two, you've also come back with a reduced fee structure. So on page 230, she's laid it out pretty well that you heard the concern, and you've reduced the fee structure from 150 to 50, from 400 to 200, from 450 to 750. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you very much. And for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and support this. And I think the other thing that you shared that needs to be repeated is that our staff is dedicating some time and energy to notifying and getting the word out. And that's important, and that you've already seen with the conversation of this that you're seeing more compliancy. So I'm going to go ahead and support this, and with the understanding that I will be a model, and I'm sure many of us are, if I get out and I shovel my residents' snow, and I encourage my boys to do the same. And if we continue to do this, I hope that we won't see any fees. Which, remind me, how many fees have you?
We issued 0 tickets.
0 tickets. 0 tickets.
Hopefully
And
we
she's
continue to
reducing.
issue 0 tickets because we get great
Exactly.
compliance.
The whole deal is compliancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming, then Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, Johanna. So can you explain to me, I did read this, accessible ramps versus curb cuts? I'm not on P&D.
No, Alderman Ravel and I had a similar conversation earlier today.
Okay.
So I think she had some amendments to address it, but there, in most intersections in Evanston, we do have accessible ramps. But as I think you're thinking and Alderman Ravel thought, we have some locations that do not have the accessible ramp just yet. So I think Alderman Ravel was going to make a amendment to the ordinance to include sidewalks that terminate into the street, intersect to the intersection, to address that piece of the snow removal.
All right, so I know you made an amendment last time. Does this current ordinance no longer include the residents? I think it doesn't, but so I'm sure the resident who lives on the corner having to do the corner.
It does include that we'd ask that they make a path to the street.
Okay, so here are my concerns with that, because I live near a corner, and I have a gentleman who goes out, 5 in the morning with his snowblower, religiously, and he leaves for work, and by the time the kids go to school, if we're on a good day and the snowplow has come, there is a mountain of snow at the corner. And the sidewalk around his house is clear, and I know that he's cleared that walk. When he gets home, if it's cold, it is a block of ice. that he is not going out there, to remove or can't remove. So I have concerns about people like that. Understand you said our inspectors maybe would give him a pass or whatever, but this would be something that they would see on his corner all the time because it happens every time it snows and he has a job to go to. So I have lots of concerns about that. I also am not really sure how we work with our seniors. I know we have the volunteer snow shovel program. I can tell you on my block where there are seniors. I can tell you where the senior has someone who shovels and where the senior does not have someone who shovels. And I will have a hard time supporting that senior then getting a notice saying, you owe us $50 because you're essentially, not in good physical shape to go out and shovel your walkway, nor do you have, someone else to do that for you. My other concern has to do with Ms. Payton brought up, which I think on here is maybe the carriage walk. So when I shovel my walk, which I'm out there with my neighbor, the time between the street and the sidewalk, I do that part because I use it, and then by the time I come back, it is full of snow again because the snowplow has come by and done it. And so if that's something that I'm being required to do, comparable to what Mr. Mr. Carlos was saying, am I going to then get a ticket because I've done everything else, but then this pile of snow is, back out on the carriage walk area because of the snowplow. And so I understand that, we're trying to get to compliance, and I also want compliance. But I also think we have to, one, as a city, do our part to make sure we're not hindering someone's ability to comply. We have to be mindful of our seniors or people who are not in great physical shape who cannot shovel, and we can't just say that, sign up with our volunteer snow program, because I don't know how many residents we have who are out there who are willing to, go out and shovel in someone's snow. So I just, I'm really hesitant. I also have heard from people like Alderman, can't remember anyone's name tonight, Wilson, that people, and even though with the reduced fee structure, right, people just, again, it feels like this continued like $5 here, $10 there. And I tell people the same thing, like comply, that is our goal. But, regardless, people just see it as another way for us to say, let us drive around and find your house and give you $50 fine. My last issue, and I'm glad you brought this up in terms of 311 complaints, would be where you go first. I can tell you, unfortunately, and maybe everyone else can, there are some neighbors who I know are just going to wait for that snow, and they're going to call on their neighbor because they don't like them because of whatever other reason. And then you're going to be out, and you're going to unfortunately be in the middle of some other kind of neighbor feud. And they're going to call you every time it snows, and this person is 25 hours in, and you're going to be going out there, and then I'm going to be hearing from the one neighbor saying, how come the city keeps targeting me about the snow? So I know you and I have talked about this. I think 311 is awesome. I think, unfortunately, people use it as a way to punish people on their block that they don't like. And so I'm concerned if this is another way in which we're going to be spinning the wheels of staff and giving people ammunition to just kind of poke the bear with neighbors.
Okay, so I'm going to start with corners, and work our way down. In terms of corners, I think if you can't get to the snow and it's become a block of ice, you can't get to the snow. Nobody can get to the snow. Maybe even city staff couldn't get to the snow if it's a full block of ice. We don't have magic shovels. So my hope is that we recognize that winter and sidewalk removal and snow and ice clearance is a maintenance activity. If the snow all melted because it was warm and then it turned into ice, I'd hope that people would sand or salt their sidewalks as well. And it wouldn't just be because it's 24 hours after the snow event, let's just maintain the sidewalks. But we're all humans, and we'll try to work with people on this stuff. But it's the goal. I'd rather try to put the mile marker and the finish line to a place where it is improving walkability and our built environment versus what we think that people might be able to. And then in terms of the senior. And then in terms of seniors, so we've worked on a decision tree for our 311 operators. So when they get the calls about the complaints, we're gonna ask some prompts to see if somebody might know if there's somebody with a disability or if they're a senior citizen and if they might need help. So we can try to have an intervention before we get to the point where an inspector's writing a ticket or a notice of violation or following up on that 311, that we can try to provide assistance in the front end. And then in terms of carriage walks, it was an additional item that was added into the code. It's certainly a policy decision. If we don't want to try to include that, that can be stricken. And then 301, I understand where we sometimes get put in the middle of the feuds between different neighbors and their frustrations. But we've tried to train our inspectors to go forth and enforce the code and do what they can. And if there's greater social service needs, we have those resources here, and we try to refer them if that becomes an issue. But I mean, we will continue to talk about how 311 gets used in that way. But I think that's the exception and not the norm.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Okay, and I appreciate all of the policy intentions and, accommodations that are going to get, but none of that's in the ordinance. It's like zero of it is in the ordinance. So if we're going to pass a law, the law has to be, and I hear what you're saying. We're not going to be overly harsh and everything, except for that's not what it says. And, if you and 3 other people apply for different jobs and somebody else takes the job and they're like, I hate snow, I'm going to anybody else who looks at this is the law. Or to Alderman Fleming's point, if a neighbor has an issue with a neighbor, whether it's legitimate or not, they can just keep calling. And if there's a handicapped person, it doesn't matter. It's too bad the law says this. It's not accounted for in this. So I don't see how we can possibly support this. It's really what's drafted as far as the law is concerned is really, really harsh, and it doesn't take any of these things into account. So I think if it can't be uniformly applied as it's written, I don't think we should be passing something that can't be uniformly applied. And I like to think that we're the kind of community that works together, but we've had some problems, and those are legitimate problems, particularly with the downtown. But the ordinance isn't a downtown sidewalk ordinance. It's a whole city. It's every single person. I live on a corner. Yeah, plow comes by, got a driveway. I've got 2 of those little ramp things, and it's really hard work. I get up really early, and when I come home, I got the great big pile of snow. So I hear you. I'm getting old. My back hurts. So it's not easy. And but at the same time, I'm lucky to be as able to as I am. So not everybody is in that same situation. So I'm really uncomfortable with this, and I can't support it the way it is.
Thank you. We got a lot of lights here, but I'm going to City Manager Storley.
Yeah, I just wanted to opine a little bit on, we have it's this intersection of what to do next. So what we currently have doesn't really work, but it's there. And what we're proposing sounds like it's not what everybody's looking for, but we need to figure out if there's a happy medium that strikes the right balance, or if we just need to go back to the drawing board and start over. So just interested to hear some feedback on whether or not you think we should, table this until we can work on it further, or if we should just scrap it and start over, or if we should just, take off what we currently have on the existing books, because clearly that's not effective either, and figure out where to go from here, because we have, legitimate concerns from the public that sidewalks don't get cleared. But I also think we're sort of reaching for the what ifs, and we're going down rabbit holes that, we actually don't have the staff to go out and enforce that every corner in the city gets, the snow plowed away from it, or shoveled away from it, or cleared, what have you. So I think, the reality is the very limited staff that we have, we could have a report annually or quarterly or monthly during snowstorm season of how many tickets we actually issue. I mean, I'm gathering from, my conversations with staff that number would be 20 or less. So we're spending a lot of time talking about what, in my expertise and opinion, is what's going to amount to about 20 tickets a year. So that's, but you can't legislate that effectively. That's just, like Alderman Wilson alluded to, just once we put the policy on the books, the policy's on the books, and then it's up to the administration at any given amount of time to, either put weight behind it or not. So just those are my thoughts on the issue, and interested to hear what comes next.
Good question. So we got lots of lights. So let's go with Alderman Braithwaite, then Fisk.
I think we're close. I mean, some may not. I appreciate the effort that you've put into it. I appreciate the comments that Alderman Wilson articulated, if we can find a way to massage that into the ordinance, I would say bring it back to us in a couple of weeks, and hopefully it's something that we can all agree to pass.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you. So my main concern is in business districts, and that we get those cleared right away. And tomorrow and the next day will probably be a really good test case for that. I'm concerned about the residential areas, although in my ward, the residential areas that are between, for example, the L stations and the Northwestern campus, there is so much traffic on those sidewalks that even with a small snow, it's packed down and is almost unmovable within an hour of the snowfall. And that's sort of unreasonable to say to folks, if you live in a certain area, you need to get out there every hour and clear the walk. I want to make it fair to them. On the other hand, I know pretty much in the residential areas where the problems are. And I think that we can address those without fining anyone. Again, I don't want 20 tickets a year. Thank you, city manager. That's important to know that how long this takes actually to get resolved. So I think what Ms. Leonard said about in terms of impressing upon homeowners how important it is to get out there and shovel. I mentioned at the last meeting that my homeowners on either side of me, both of them work out of town. I shovel their walks. I don't do it as well as my walk, but I make the effort. And I think we just need to impress on everyone that pedestrian safety is really important to all of us. I want to thank Alderman Wilson for his comments, though, because they're really important, and that's at the heart of getting this right, because we can't, as nice as our inspectors are, what we're putting in is law, what you must do. And the ability to be nicer or to make, concessions, that's not in here. And in many ways, that's not fair to our residents to do that. So I'd like to find, city manager, I'd like to find a way to get the snow removed from the business districts and figure out a way to educate our snow removal guys about keeping alleys and driveways open. And maybe that's where we can start and work on the rest of it in residential areas to get it right.
Thank you. We got Alderman Nguyen, then Alderman Rainey.
Well, clearly, this is an issue that we're passionate about in many ways. What I find in the third ward is the business districts are much better than the residential areas. So I think it varies from place to place. I think, like Alderman Braithwaite, that we're close. I have had many phone calls with people who are really frustrated. The third ward is a highly pedestrian trafficked area, and I have many phone calls from people who are just furious that it's always the same folks who never shovel, and then it just becomes really treacherous. So I think we're close. I think what we currently have does not work, and I do agree with Alderman Fisk that we need to tweak this somewhat, and also having it on the books that people are, you are required to do this, to get out there and do it. And most neighbors recognize when they, their next door neighbor is out of town, they're not going to call the city on them. I'm sorry that we have this Hatfield-McCoy issue sometimes with 311. But I'm sitting here thinking about it is illegal to park too close to a corner. It is illegal to park too close to an alley. If your meter runs out, you are in violation. We don't manage to get every single person ticket, every single person who parks too close to an alley or whose meter has run out or who, we don't have the staff for that. But knowing that you're not supposed to do it is enough to get people, generally speaking, to not take a chance. So I think that's the balance we're trying to achieve here. I used to live in D.C. D.C. had it was not possible to park illegally in Washington and not get a ticket. And so it was so intense that you never parked illegally because I don't know how many D.C. PEOs they employed, but it was a lot. Unlike Evanston, we balance it out. And so sometimes people park too close to the corner and they don't get a ticket. But they know that there's a possibility that they might, and they comply. So I do think having this new ordinance means that people will become more conscious of, as Director Leonard told us, we had 600 falls last year, and I think all of us can probably think of someone we know who has broken a wrist, broken an elbow, who are not necessarily seniors. So, I mean, this is about the general health of everyone here in Evanston. I think with some additional tweaking, perhaps looking at, like, what does Minneapolis do, or some other cities, I think that we'll get there. But we need something, because we can't continue with letting people get rutted ice, allow them to get rutted ice for weeks at a time.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
Well, I think what irritated people the most is when they call up 311 and make a report of someone who hasn't shoveled, and they're told, we're sorry, we can't do anything because it hasn't snowed 4 or 5 inches. That just makes them crazy, because there's ice on the sidewalk and snow on the sidewalk. So that's one of the things we were trying to resolve. So that's one thing. So I think we should just completely remove any representation for any kind of amount of ice or amount of snow. If it snows or it's icy, you have to clean your sidewalk. And I think that just has to be the bottom line. And then I think the door hanger is what we should do. I mean, I really think we should pursue that. But I don't think it should be so malevolent as we've been with tickets and things. I don't see how we're going to collect a fine. We listened to Johanna at our last meeting where she laid out the timeline. It was like a month before there was any possibility even of an aggressive hearing officer even leveling a fine. So it's a month. That is so much money wasted that let's just make sure there's some contact with the person who's being complained about and move on. I think the door hanger is sufficient. And then but the downtown, the commercial is more serious, I think. But in the neighborhoods, I think a door hanger, and let's move on. I just don't see what else we can do.
Thank you, Alderman. We've had a robust conversation on this item of A18. I see no more lights. We had a motion that was seconded. So I don't know if we want to vote on that, or somebody wants to put another motion forward on how they'd like to proceed.
For the edits? Hold it. Hold it.
All right, let's see. Alderman Ravel. Okay, so there was a motion to hold and a second. Alderman Ravel.
Oh, no, I was just going to suggest that we hold it, and then Johanna can make the revision that I was going to make tonight.
All right. There's a lot of conversation tonight, Johanna, so if you could think about all of this and bring the council back something else to react to.
City Manager, can we have the actual notices? I'd ask for that, just a sample, see what it says to give press. Thank you.
All right, so I forget, do I need to take a vote on a hold? Nope. Okay, so it was moved and seconded. This item is held and will be brought back to the council at a certain point. Okay, Alderman Sufferton, now it's your turn. Could you move P1?
I move item P1, which is approval of vacation rental license for a property that is not owner-occupied at 2723 Noyes Street. Staff recommends approval of a vacation rental license that is not owner-occupied for the single-family residence of 2723 Noyes Street. The vacation rental meets all the standards and procedures for license approval. This is for action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, this item's open for conversation. Seeing no lights, City Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Alderman Sufferton.
Yes.
Alderman Ravel. Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming. Aye. Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite.
Yes.
Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
All right, so P1 passes the Evanston City Council on the 7-1 vote. Alderman Suffredin, P2 for everybody was held in committee, and so if you could take us to P5.
Item P5 is ordinance 166-019, granting a special use for an educational institution, private, and a religious institution, St. Athanasius School and Parish, to expand off-street parking in the R1 single-family residential district. Zoning Board of Appeals recommends denial, and staff recommends City Council adoption of ordinance 166-019, granting special use approval for an educational institution, private, and religious institution, St. Athanasius School and Parish, to expand off-street parking at 2503 Eastwood Avenue, 2510 Ashland Avenue, 1615 Lincoln Street in the R1 single-family residential district. The Zoning Board of Appeals found the proposal does not meet all of the standards for a special use in this district. Specifically, the proposed parking expansion would increase the negative cumulative impact on the surrounding residential neighborhood and may interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. Following the ZBA hearing, the applicant submitted a modified traffic circulation plan and parking and operations summary that will mitigate the impact on the surrounding residential neighborhood. This is for action.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, so this item's now open for conversation. We'll start with Alderman Ravel and Alderman Fleming.
Okay. Well, I have to acknowledge at the start that this has been a difficult issue, and I acknowledge that it's there's not really a solution that's a good one for the neighbors. Once the house was taken down at there on Eastwood, it did really erode the residential character of Eastwood further than it had already been eroded by the institutional use. But it seems to me this is a difficult balancing act because we have the interests of an important community institution on the one hand and protecting the residential quality of the adjacent neighborhood. So I've been struggling for the last several months, I think, to see if there was a way to make it work that would bring some kind of improvement to the situation. And so it does seem to me that granting the special use will accomplish two things. By expanding the south parking lot, it's going to provide an area for additional parking for teachers and staff during the school day, and so it will remove the cars from the south half of the main parking lot, which will then make that large area car-free and thus a safer play area for the St. A students during the school hours. And this clearing out the cars from parking on the south side of that main parking lot will also provide space for a revised circulation pattern, which I'm hopeful is going to reduce the traffic congestion in the South Alley and along Eastwood during school pickup hours, because that seemed, the initial conversations, the big focus seemed to be on the traffic congestion at school pickup times. So so I do think that will bring an improvement to the traffic situation. There are some conditions in the ordinance. Tonight it was mentioned about the difficulty with, or the problem for the neighbors with tailgating, particularly in that south parking lot. And the condition in the ordinance is that the south parking lot shall not be rented out for any non-St. A's events. In addition, there's a condition that says there needs to be a better management plan if St. A's were to rent out the main parking lot. And I'm prepared to ride herd to make sure that happens properly. The actual permit, when St. A's gets ready to apply for the permit for the parking lot, they will have to go to DAPR, and that will give us another opportunity to talk again about the conditions that must be met. In addition, we need to, there have been several mentions over the months before ZBA, et cetera, about the importance of landscape screening along Eastwood so that it will create at least a visual buffer for the neighbors. And so I think that's an important thing that DAPR needs to be really focusing on. what else did I want to say? Anyway, I do think that there are, in a number of places, conditions that have been actually put in the ordinance, or representations were made at ZBA and at DAPR that the city and I will be holding St. A's to complying with, and so I will be supporting the special use request.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fleming, then Alderman Nguyen.
Yeah, I had a question of something that was brought up, I think, by the gentleman who represented or spoke on behalf of St. A's, which was he said that the city came out and did a traffic study for them. And I'm just curious because usually when we have, developers and such.
It was a traffic count.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. That's obviously a very different process. Okay. And then my other just question, and not question, but I guess concern in looking at this map and hearing from the residents right around is the usage of the alley. So on the map, it has public alleys in pink here, and it looks like the public alleys are definitely part of the traffic plan for the parking. And my concern with that is that we don't pay our alleys, right? So you have to go through the special assessment to get the alley paved, and we know that we grade the alleys best we can, but our alleys are not always in the best shape. So now, I don't know how many cars go through there now, but we're talking about adding additional cars through here to get to additional parking lots. And so the wear and tear potentially on that alley, that then all the other residents who use the alley for access to garages or whatever else are then also going to have to endure when we as a city are not going to go out there and do any extra mediation of, potholes or whatever things happen. So those are other concerns. That is a concern that I have based on the way that this map is laid out, that this public entity is going to put potentially more wear and tear on an alley that then our citizens have to endure with their own cars, and we are not going to take up the cost to mediate, within our own budget.
Thank you. Alderman Ravel.
Well, just to provide some more additional information, the revised circulation pattern is not putting additional cars down the alley. It's those cars are already going down the alley, but they're currently lining up in the alley, waiting to get into the main parking lot where the pickup happens. So what we're going to be able to do is have 2 lanes of people waiting to pick up in the main parking lot so that the cars can get down the south alley quicker and not line up there. So I know we're not talking about adding additional traffic.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, I'm sensitive to the nearby neighbors talking about the tailgating issue. And Alderman Ravel, I see that under subsection D, it says that there will be a management plan for addressing and monitoring those issues. Will that?
And that's for the main parking lot.
That's for the main parking lot, right. But I understand their concerns about, inappropriate behavior during games and that they have not been satisfied by St. A's response to that. I think that we've heard a lot from the neighbors here, so I would like to make sure that there's some teeth in that management plan, so that that if there are complaints, that there's a reason for St. A's to properly manage this and not say they can't control people, because that's not fair.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support the neighbors on this. I've had several similar experiences in the first ward, and it does have a really negative impact on quality of life in a residential neighborhood. This is not single-family residential neighbors who have put up with a lot, and a wonderful school, and I'm sure wonderful kids and parents and teachers and administrators, but this is hard. This is really hard, and the use of the alleys I don't think is appropriate. Alderman Fleming raised a really good point, and that is that over time the adjoining neighbors have paid for these alleys. I don't know whether St. A's is considering taking the responsibility of paving the parts of the alley that it's going to use or not. But I just see that this is a real negative for neighbors, and I'm going to support their point of view.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. Seeing no more lights, this was moved and seconded. City Clerk, could you please take the roll for P5?
Alderman Sufferton.
No.
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
No.
Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
Well, this is an interesting situation. So we have a 4-4 vote, and I break these votes. But I have a child that goes to St. A's, so I definitely feel that I have to recuse myself on this matter. So I'm not sure. I guess I turn to our city attorney how this works. Normally, there would be Alderman Ruth Simmons here to vote one way or the other, and she's not this evening.
It fails.
So it fails. I mean.
That was what I was going to say. Thank
Okay.
you, Alderman.
All right, so that vote was 4-4 tie, and in the situation of a tie, it means that it does not pass and it fails. So, okay. All right, we're going to move on to P7. Alderman Sufferton, if you would introduce that.
Item P7 is ordinance 25020, amending Title 7, Chapter 8, Section 8, tree preservation. Staff recommends City Council adoption of ordinance 25020, amending the tree preservation ordinance 7-8-8 to apply to trees 25 inches in diameter at breast height and larger, 20 inches at breast height or larger for oak and hickory species on private property whose improvements are proposed that are classified as new construction, or those who would increase the amount of impervious surface by more than 600 square feet. This is for action.
Is there a second? Okay, this is items open for conversation. Seeing no lights. Okay, there's a light. Alderman Fisk.
Yes, thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. I want to make sure that we have one amendment in here. Alderman Nguyen, maybe you can help me with this. We want to make sure, I believe, that folks who are wanting to take a tree down don't just have the option of saying, I will come in and give you money to do replacement trees, but there be a process on which we can deny the request to remove a tree with the provision for an appeal to council. I'm not sure how we put that language in. I'm fine with the 20 inches to start with, and let's see how that goes. I can't imagine we're going to have a whole lot of these each year, but I do think it's really important. If the purpose of this ordinance, and I believe the purpose of this is to save our heritage trees, those trees that give our community back so much, that we just can't be as casual as to say you can take the tree out but plant some other ones. So what language can I suggest as an amendment?
That's a referral I'm going to take, Alderman, and not comment on that tonight.
Okay. All right, Alderman Nguyen, did you want to?
Yes, I think Alderman Fisk, because we've gotten this far, but I do think there's some additional things that we do that have just come up in the last day or so. I would recommend that has this been held already?
No.
I would recommend we hold it until the next meeting, and that you and I talk with the staff about, I agree with Alderman Fisk. I think the point of this was that we should protect some of our particularly valuable trees, and that simply causing someone to pay for replacing them with X number of trees doesn't really achieve the goal that we want. And the trees are not there. We now recognize the environmental value of these trees, and this actually applies to carp. So I think that if I would like to move to hold it, and then we bring it back.
Okay, second.
Okay, so that item is going to be held? Okay. Okay, so that item will be held. So that's P7. We're now going to move to call of the wards. Alderman Sufferton. Alderman Ravel.
I'd just like to mention that Thursday next week, March 5th at 7 p.m. in the Parasol Room on the 4th floor is going to be an affordable housing community workshop, and this is will be the culmination of sort of a first round of community outreach to talk with residents about what they see as the needs in the community and what some possible strategies are that they might want to support. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to come share your thoughts with the Affordable Housing Planning Committee and with your neighbors. So 7 o'clock on March 5th.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey.
Yes, on Thursday at 7:30, there'll be a meeting at the Levy Center regarding the reuse and redevelopment of the recycling center. And also at 7 o'clock that same night, a very short meeting for people that live in the Kirk and Dewey area regarding the Commonwealth Edison trimming of trees on Kirk and the options that we're going to offer you. Paul DiAgostino will be there regarding either replacement or an attempt to rejuvenate those trees that have been severely damaged and are in pretty bad shape. So people on Kirk, please come and talk with us before we have to make a move on the trees. Thank you very much.
Alderman Fleming.
Yes, I have two referrals for HSC. One is an update on our equity work. The other is an update on our translation policy. And I think that's it. Oh, actually, don't forget to appeal your property taxes. You can appeal your property taxes if you own a home in Evanston until the end of March.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to remind everyone who is interested in the legacy plan development. This is an extension of the Marion it's from 1621 to 31 Chicago Avenue is going to Plan Commission on Wednesday night. So that's 7 p.m. And first ward meeting is the first Tuesday in March, which I think is March 3rd, 7 to 9 p.m. at the library per usual.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share that there is an event that's sponsored by the Evanston Community Foundation and Evanston Cradle to Career. It's Lifting Up Early Childhood. It's a 3-part series. The next conversation is going to be hosted in the 2nd Ward Wednesday, February 26th at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. School. It's going to be, they'll have a presentation from the Erickson Institute, and the president, Jeff Nagel, will be there talking about the first 1,100 days of childcare. So promoting a lot of good conversation surrounding the importance of childcare. And there are going to be I think this has been organized with over 60 partners. So encouraging a lot of people to come out. They will provide childcare and dinner. The only ask is that you register, and you can do that at evanstonforever.org/lifting up. Great opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Wynn? Alderman Wilson?
No report. I have a motion.
Okay, yeah, could you lead us into executive session?
Yes, pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes, ILCS 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel, litigation, and minutes. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session, and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act. The exceptions are 5 ILCS 120/2A, C1, C11, and C21.
Is there a second? City Clerk? All right. City Clerk, you take the roll, please.
Alderman Sufferton. Alderman Ravel. Alderman Rainey. Alderman Fleming. Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
All right. On 8-0 vote, we're going to recess into executive session. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.